Welcome back to Novel Explanation. Before we dive in, if you're new here, we bring you full story explanations, audiobook style, one part at a time. Let's get into it. Chapter 3002, 3002. Translator, 549-6903, Zhang Fei frowned and asked, "I'm sorry, I can't tell you that either. When you meet them, you can ask them," King Jacob said. Zhang Fei frowned but did not say anything. However, he instinctively felt that something was not right. King Jacob waved his hand, and someone walked to Zhang Fei's side. The person said to Zhang Fei. Zhang Fei frowned and followed the person out of the palace. From the beginning until the end, including King Jacob, no one had asked his name. Instead, they had called him an alien. This was very unusual. If they had just met, it would have been fine. However, when Zhang Fei was already in the main hall, King Jacob did not even ask for his name. Instead, he continued to call him an alien. This was very disrespectful. Zhang Fei actually did not care about King Jacob's attitude. Normally, even if people did not ask for his name, he would not feel anything. He did not seem to want to interact with Zhang Fei anymore. It was as if Zhang Fei did not matter at all, or that he would soon cease to exist. Therefore, he did not need to know Zhang Fei's name at all. Zhang Fei frowned. If King Jacob was hostile towards him, that would make sense. At least Zhang Fei was not an enemy. There was no reason for King Jacob to be hostile towards him. With some doubts, Zhang Fei left the palace with King Jacob's entourage. They went all the way to the so-called inn. From the beginning, Zhang Fei did not have much hope for this inn. After all, even the palace was only like that. It was already good enough that this inn was not a thatched cottage. However, when he really reached the inn, Zhang Fei was still a little disappointed. The so-called inn was like a bunker. 5 meters tall, 8 meters tall, therefore, not only did he have to bend his waist, but he also had to bend his legs. Fortunately, after entering the interior of the inn, it dug down more than a meter deep. This way, after deducting the thickness of the roof, Zhang Fei could barely stand inside. However, if he stepped on it slightly, his head would be on top of the roof. As for the interior of the room, it was even shabbier. There was a platform made of extremely fast strips of stone. It was about the size of a bed. There was also a tree stump. It should be considered a chair in the room. Other than that, there was nothing else in the room. "All right, you can rest here now. However, do not wander around. I do not know when the king will summon you," King Jacob's followers said to Zhang Fei. Zhang Fei nodded. Although this place was relatively simple, he could spend the night in the wild, let alone here. Moreover, staying here would also make it easier for him to investigate the whereabouts of Nina and Ariel. Although King Jacob did not reveal the whereabouts of Nina and Ariel, since the two of them were in the Walloon tribe in the Breton Woods, everyone knew about them. Therefore, it was likely that no one here would not know about them. As long as Zhang Fei was careful, it should not be difficult to find some clues. It was precisely because of this that Zhang Fei decided to stay in this simple courier station. Although there was nothing here, Zhang Fei had brought his own things. He had stored a large amount of resources in the inheritance space. Not to mention that there were beds and chairs here. Even if there was not even a house, Zhang Fei could still solve it himself. After taking out some supplies from the inheritance space, Zhang Fei made some simple arrangements for the room. Although it did not require much luxury, he still had to prepare the things that he could use. He did not know how long he would have to stay here. The first day passed very quickly. No one brought Zhang Fei food. Fortunately, he had stored a lot of ready-made food. He could just take it out and enjoy it. The next morning, Zhang Fei decided to go out for a walk. Although King Jacob's followers had told him not to wander around, he was not a criminal. Therefore, no one was watching him. As long as he did not go far away, King Jacob would look for him, as long as he could come back in time. After coming out of the semi-basement-like courier station, Zhang Fei came to the streets of the holy city of Westphalia. This city was very big, but the real bustling place was only the central cross street. The other places were more like slums. It was dirty and messy. As Zhang Fei walked on the streets, the Walloon people on both sides of him kept throwing curious gazes at him. It was a bit like how everyone looked at foreigners in Jiang Fei's hometown in the early years. As he walked around, Jiang Fei noticed a problem. The people here did not use the Mink Star language to talk. Instead, they used the Wallen language, would use the planet Namek language when they were communicating. Therefore, Jiang Fei wandered around the streets for a long time. In the end, he did not hear any news because he could not understand what the people were saying. Jiang Fei used his finger to tap on the combat ability tester that he was wearing. This thing had a translation function, but the Walloon language was not in its database. Therefore, this thing was useless. Jiang Fei had no choice but to start from solving the language problem. Fortunately, he did not need to learn a language from scratch. With the combat ability tester, he could quickly crack the unknown language. After finding a hidden place, Jiang Fei knocked out a Wallen and dragged him to a corner. Then, Jiang Fei took off the combat ability recorder and put it on the Wallen's head. Brainwave detection. Identifying. Unknown language logic sequence. No known language sequence detected in brainwave detection. Damn it, this kid doesn't know the planet Namek language. Jiang Fei sighed. This kind of rapid language deciphering function was done by comparing the two languages in the Wallen's memory. It was done quickly. Now, this Walloon kid did not know the planet Namek language, nor did he know any other languages in Jiang Fei's universe. Therefore, he could not make a comparison. Therefore, Jiang Fei took out the combat power testing device and changed to another target to try again. When Jiang Fei changed to the fifth target, he finally found a guy who was proficient in the Walloon language and the planet Namek language. Then, he used the combat power testing device to decode the new language. He stored it in the database. Jiang Fei's lips curled into a smile. Now that the language problem was solved, he could go and gather information. Chapter 3003, 3003. Translator, 549-6903. After Jiang Fei used the combat ability testing device to decipher the Walloon language, he put on his glasses and walked out onto the streets again. This time, the conversation of the originally noisy Walloon people was transmitted into Jiang Fei's ears through the combat ability testing device. It became an understandable language. Sai, do you think that we will be participating in the king's wedding? Who knows? Maybe the whole world will celebrate it. It would be great if we could participate. Maybe we can also eat those delicacies. TSK. That's not important. What's important is that after the king's wedding, they will stay in Westphalia forever. When that time comes, our days will be better and better. That's right. When will the king get married? In 3 days. Jiang Fei walked around casually. However, the discussions he heard were mostly about the King Jacob getting married. The king is so lucky. That's right. However, the king is quite pitiful. For the sake of our happiness, for the sake of keeping them, he actually wants to marry those 2 ugly aliens. Suddenly, Jiang Fei's attention was drawn over. Jiang Fei took 2 steps and arrived in front of the 2 Valens. Through the combat power recorder's translation, his words were translated into the Valen's language and then transmitted to the 2 people's ears. The 2 people were stunned by Jiang Fei's question. Jiang Fei repeated. The 2 people said fearfully as they looked at Jiang Fei's slightly red eyes. Jiang Fei asked again. It was those 2 aliens. One of the Wallens said. Jiang Fei thought to himself. Now, he was 100% sure that Nina and Ariel were in Westphalia. What? The 2 people asked, trembling. Nothing. Jiang Fei put on a smile. Hey, can't you just ask around and tell us properly? After the 2 Wallen realized that there was no danger, they immediately heaved a sigh of relief. At the same time, their expressions became unhappy. All right, I won't disturb you anymore. Jiang Fei was afraid that his emotions would reveal something, so he quickly turned around and left. After that, Jiang Fei directly returned to his relay station. He sat on a tree stump and began to calculate. King Jacob's strength was about 30 million combat power. He was nothing in Jiang Fei's eyes. However, the problem was that Jiang Fei was not sure if the Wallen race still had any experts. Moreover, as he could not release his spiritual power, It was inconvenient for Jiang Fei to find people. Even if he charged into the palace, there was nothing he could do. That was because he did not know where Nina and Ariel were being held. Therefore, after thinking about it, Jiang Fei finally decided to hold back for now. He would wait until the wedding day before making a move. On the wedding day, as the bride, Nina and Ariel would definitely show up. By then, Jiang Fei could naturally rob them and run away. Even if there were still experts in the Walloon race, Jiang Fei was confident that he could escape under the pursuit of these people. As long as he reached a safe place, he could use the shuttle to bring Ariel and Nina out of the black hole. After making up his mind, Jiang Fei did not leave the courier station. He stayed in the cellar to recuperate until the day of the wedding arrived on the third day. Alien. Just as Jiang Fei was about to leave, a group of soldiers came to the door of the courier station. Jiang Fei asked, "Today is the king's wedding." The captain of the soldiers replied. Jiang Fei nodded and followed the group of soldiers to the palace. When Jiang Fei reached the outside of the palace, he found that the place was already decorated with lanterns and streamers. Moreover, wooden tables were placed all over the streets. It seemed that King Jacob was going to set up a feast for the entire city. He was preparing to celebrate with the whole world. "It's quite lively," Jiang Fei muttered. "Yeah," the captain of the soldiers beside him said. Jiang Fei nodded and followed the captain into the palace. After that, Jiang Fei was arranged in an empty room. There was only a table and 2 chairs. There was nothing else. There was no tea or water on the table. Jiang Fei just sat there and waited. To be honest, King Jacob did not take Jiang Fei seriously. The reason why he invited Jiang Fei today was because he felt that he was part of Nina and Ariel's family. "Ariel, stop crying. Today is our wedding day," King Jacob said to Ariel in a secret room. At this time, Ariel and Nina had their powers sealed. Then they were locked in this room. Although Nina and Ariel were also people with power, it was a pity that their combat power was not particularly strong. Nina had 23 million combat power points and also had a spatial core. Ariel was in a worse situation. She only had 9 million combat strength. Hence, the two of them together were not a match for King Jacob. During this period of time, King Jacob had detained Nina and Ariel, but he did not do anything to them. They were not within the scope of the Wallon's aesthetic standards. Therefore, if it was just based on their beauty, Nina and Ariel were actually not within the scope of King Jacob's consideration. However, these two girls had many new ideas. Furthermore, they had many abilities to help the Wallon race become stronger. In order to keep these two girls in the Wallon race, King Jacob had thought of this trick. Then, he would have a few more children. Then, they would not be able to leave. No, I don't want to marry you." Ariel screamed. Nina, who was standing at the side, did not say a word. Although she knew what kind of fate she and Ariel were about to face, she was more rational. This was a black hole. If Jiang Fei could save them, he would have come long ago. Now, praying for him to appear was just an extravagant hope. "All right, dress them up." King Jacob frowned. No one wanted the woman to cry during their wedding. After he turned around and left, a few female Walloons came in. From their appearance, one could not tell that they were much different from the male Walloons. Chapter 3004. Translator 549-6903. After King Jacob left, Ariel could not stop sobbing. Nina was also silent. There was no point in resisting. Ariel asked Nina while crying. Nina said quietly, "But that guy," Ariel said. "Humph." Nina smiled at Ariel. Ariel's eyes suddenly lit up with hope. "No, I can't beat him." Nina shook her head. Ariel was dumbfounded. Nina suddenly asked. Ariel said timidly, but then she added, "But I would rather die than let him touch me." "Okay, when the wedding ceremony is over, I will detonate the space core in my body." Nina's expression was still indifferent. Ariel widened her eyes and looked at Nina. This sister who was born as a saintess was the kindest. Ariel would never have thought that Nina would say something like this. At this moment, Nina's heart was really cold. They had wholeheartedly helped these guys, but in the end, they ended up like this. This allowed Nina to see through the Walloon race. not just King Jacob. After being placed under house arrest, Nina had begged many Walloon race members who were able to enter the palace for the first time to help them. Among these people, there were many who had been helped by Nina and Ariel many times, but these people all reported to King Jacob without exception, causing the guard around Nina and Ariel to become more and more strict. The possibility of them escaping became lower and lower. So at this moment, Nina had seen through it. Not everyone was grateful, and not everyone was worth helping. Some people, if you helped them, would repeat the story of the farmer and the snake. Once upon a time, Nina believed that human nature was good, but now, reality had taught her a hard lesson. Therefore, Nina decided to detonate her space core during the wedding when there were the most people. Then, she would pull King Jacob along and drag as many ingrates along with her to perish together. Ariel nodded vigorously, as she did not use the Mink Star language or the Walloon language when she was talking to Nina. The Walloon women who were responsible for dressing them did not understand. Time passed by slowly. Jiang Fei sat in the so-called side hall and waited patiently. He had already heard the sound of gongs and drums outside. Even if he did not go out to look, he could guess how lively it was outside. At this time, a Walloon attendant walked in. Jiang Fei nodded and followed the attendant to the viewing platform. The so-called observation platform was actually a platform built with a few large stones at the side of the platform. There were some wooden blocks on it. It was probably a seat. At that moment, there was only an empty seat. The seats were already filled with the Walloons. These guys were all dressed very comically. Although they used a lot of expensive cloth, because of their poor craftsmanship, their clothes were made very unsightly. Moreover, the Walloons' appearance was something that Jiang Fei could not accept. Therefore, these guys dressed in colorful clothes really made Jiang Fei's stomach turn. The servant pointed at the empty tree stump. This seat was slightly at the back. Moreover, the Walloons were all very fat. Therefore, Jiang Fei was almost blocked by them, said Jiang Fei as he nodded. He did not mind where he was sitting, as he would soon be singing the lead role on the stage. After Jiang Fei sat down, the wedding started not long after. Weddings were very important no matter which civilization or race it was, including the Walloons. King Jacob's wedding was even more grand. The opening ceremony alone took almost 2 hours. Jiang Fei waited patiently at the back. He did not care about the wedding process at all. He sat behind the Walloon leaders and quietly rested. As the wedding ceremony progressed, it was finally time for the bride to show up. As the MC announced loudly, Nina and Ariel walked up to the ceremonial stage, surrounded by a group of Walloon women. Just as Nina and Ariel walked up to the stage, Jiang Fei opened his eyes. 2 cold lights flashed in his eyes. That's right, Jiang Fei thought to himself. As the Walloon race did not have a custom of wearing a red veil, Jiang Fei immediately saw the 2 girls that he had missed for a long time. Jiang Fei took a deep breath. At this time, the wedding was already at the crucial part. Before the ceremony is announced, I would like to ask a question according to the usual practice. Although this question is useless, no one will oppose the king's wedding. After all, it is a process. The MC said half-jokingly, in his opinion, who would dare to come out and cause trouble for the king's wedding? At this moment, Nina had already begun to secretly circulate her energy. She was already prepared. She was about to detonate the spatial core in her body. Jiang Fei suddenly stood up and shouted loudly. Ah! Everyone present was stunned. No one had expected that someone would really come out and cause trouble at this time. Husband, am I dreaming? Ariel turned around and looked at the voice. She would never forget that familiar face. Fei, this is impossible. Nina shook her head hard. However, Jiang Fei's smiling face was still clear. Jiang Fei directly teleported to the side of Nina and Ariel. He said softly to the 2 girls, "Don't be afraid. I'm here." Although it was only 6 words, in the ears of Nina and Ariel, they felt an unprecedented sense of security. It was as if once this man appeared, all the difficulties and troubles would be solved. Ariel could no longer suppress her emotions. She threw herself into Jiang Fei's arms and cried loudly. Nina's eyes were also filled with tears. Chapter 3005. Translator. 549-6903. All right, all right. Jiang Fei patted the two girls' backs lightly. Nina and Ariel nodded. Since Jiang Fei was here, they did not have to worry about the rest. Jiang Fei would solve all the problems. Jacob King looked at Jiang Fei and asked unhappily, "Of course I do. I'm going to take my woman away." Jiang Fei said calmly, "Oomph. Alien, I'm going to give you one last warning. Leave this place as soon as possible. Get out of here before I kill someone on my wedding day." King Jacob threatened Jiang Fei without holding back. Because Jiang Fei had been obedient for the past few days, he did not put Jiang Fei in his eyes at all. Otherwise, Jiang Fei could not help but laugh coldly. Then he continued, "You imprison my women and force them to marry you. This is enough for me to kill you 100 times. Why are you telling me otherwise?" Oomph. When King Jacob saw that Jiang Fei did not know how to appreciate favors, he was furious on the spot. In front of thousands of people, King Jacob felt that he had to kill this alien in front of him. He would lose all his prestige in front of the people. Therefore, when he thought of this, the furious King Jacob attacked Jiang Fei. With a wave of his hand, a mace appeared in his hand. It seemed that the mace was the usual weapon of the Wallen race. The sound of the mace was heard. It came straight for Jiang Fei's face. Jiang Fei snorted. The King Jacob in front of him was very strong. He had more than 35 million combat power. He could be considered an expert even in the 5 directions of heaven and earth. However, the problem was that the person standing in front of him was the Grand Dragon Sage. Facing the mace that was coming at him, Jiang Fei grabbed it with one hand, preventing the mace from falling any further. At that moment, the veins on the Jacob King's forehead were popping up. He had used all his strength in this attack, but it was easily blocked by the opponent with one hand. Moreover, the spiked mace did not cause any damage to the opponent at all. King Jacob roared angrily. Then, he used all his strength in an attempt to smash Jiang Fei to death. However, the spiked mace was held in midair by Jiang Fei. No matter how much strength Jacob used, it did not move at all. At this moment, King Jacob began to panic. As the saying went, when an expert stretched out his hand, there was nothing. Although it was only a short round, he had already understood the alien in front of him was definitely someone he could not afford to offend. However, so what if he understood? It was too late. As Jiang Fei shouted, he grabbed the mace with his right hand and pulled it back. King Jacob was very happy. He did not even take a big bite before he let go. Actually, this was not because King Jacob was easy to talk to. It was because he had to let go. Just now, when Jiang Fei exerted his strength, King Jacob felt a terrifying force coming from a mace. His entire body would be pulled over. Once he was pulled over, it was obvious what would happen to him. Therefore, when Jiang Fei exerted his strength, King Jacob did not struggle. He just let go and gave a spiked mace to Jiang Fei. Jiang Fei weighed it with his hand. The spiked mace turned in midair, and his small head was held in his hand. Then, Jiang Fei caught up with King Jacob, who was retreating. He swung the spiked mace and smashed it at him. King Jacob cried out. Then, he realized that he could not dodge it anymore. He subconsciously raised both his hands to try to stop him. However, the problem was, could he stop him? With a crisp sound, King Jacob's arms were broken on the spot. However, even so, the mace did not slow down and continued to hit King Jacob's head, followed by another crisp sound. The king of the Walloon race, Jacob, had been hit by more than 10,000 peach blossoms. Red and white splattered everywhere. The red was blood, the white was brain matter. Anyway, Jiang Fei did not know what the audience felt. At least, he still had the 2 girls behind him. He did not want to eat tofu pudding anymore. Jiang Fei threw King Jacob's spike club on the ground. Then, he turned around and said to Nina and Ariel, "Let's go." Nina and Ariel nodded. Then, they followed Jiang Fei down the ceremonial stage. If it was any other time, Nina would have found it hard to accept such a scene. As a saintess, she was too kind. However, after experiencing the Valen tribe incident, Nina had seen through many things. That was why Jiang Fei had killed King Jacob so cruelly. She did not say a word. As Jiang Fei and the other two walked down the ceremonial stage, the Walloon race soldiers who had already surrounded the ceremonial stage retreated to the sides. Although Jiang Fei had killed King Jacob, it was a capital offense in the Walloon race. However, the powerful King Jacob had been killed in an instant. Who among these soldiers dared to go forward? Not only did they not dare to go forward, but as Jiang Fei continued to move forward, they could only retreat continuously. They even gave Jiang Fei and the other two a way out of the city. Jiang Fei laughed coldly. He did not plan to leave the city on foot. The main reason he walked down the ceremonial stage was to demonstrate his power. Seeing that the soldiers did not dare to go forward, Jiang Fei did not want to create more bloodshed. Therefore, he summoned the Chungying sword. Then, he brought Nina and Ariel up into the air. Initially, the size of the Chungying sword could only allow Jiang Fei to bring one more person. However, Jiang Fei thought of an idea. He let Nina stand behind him. Although Ariel had nowhere to stand, she was carried in his arms. Then, he rode the sword and rose up. Ariel, who was carried by Jiang Fei Princess, quickly fell asleep. She had not slept for the past few days. She was afraid that King Jacob would do something evil when she fell asleep. Fortunately, the Walloon race had a unique aesthetic. Therefore, King Jacob did not covet the beauty of the two women. Therefore, there was no such thing as coming first before the wedding. Even so, Ariel and Nina were exhausted. Now that Ariel was lying in Jiang Fei's arms, she was completely relaxed. As a result, her drowsiness came. She could not hold on any longer. Not long after, Nina, who was holding Jiang Fei's waist, fell asleep in a daze. As she was too tired, even if she was standing, she fell asleep on Jiang Fei's back. Sigh. Jiang Fei sighed. He rode his flying sword and flew for an unknown distance before landing in a deep mountain. Halfway up the mountain, Jiang Fei released a stream of sword aura and created a cave. Then, he took out some daily necessities from the inheritance space and decorated the cave. After that, Jiang Fei carried Nina and Ariel. He placed them on a comfortable bed. They needed to rest too much. Chapter 3006, 3006. Translator, 549, 690. 3 time passed quickly. In the blink of an eye, a day had passed. Nina and Ariel were fast asleep. The two of them did not even get up to eat because Jiang Fei had returned to their side. This allowed the two of them to finally relax. It was not until the next day that the two girls woke up. When they opened their eyes, they saw a table full of delicacies. These delicacies were personally cooked by Jiang Fei. The ingredients were brought by Jiang Fei from the outer universe, so it was filled with the taste of home. It smells so good. Ariel was about to attack when Jiang Fei gently patted her hand. Jiang Fei laughed and scolded. Ariel pouted and went to the side. At this time, Jiang Fei had already prepared the things for them to wash up. Very soon, Ariel and Nina had finished washing up. Then, they came to the dining table. It's really delicious, Ariel praised as she ate. She really missed this familiar, yet unfamiliar taste. Jiang Fei looked at Nina and asked. Nina nodded. At the same time, her eyes were already wet. She had pinched herself more than once to prove that this was not a dream. Although it was painful every time, the pain made her feel very real and very happy. Soon, the meal was finished. Nina and Ariel both had smiles on their faces. It was not because Jiang Fei's culinary skills were very good. Although he was doing well, he could not be compared to a proper chef. Ariel and Nina had such happy smiles because they were reunited with Jiang Fei again. All right, let's pack up, Jiang Fei said to Nina and Ariel with a smile. Ariel looked confused. Nina asked in surprise. She had thought of many ways, but unfortunately, she had failed. Of course, since I have come to save you, I naturally have a way to bring you out, Jiang Fei smiled and said. All right, husband, how is the outside world? Ariel asked. They had lived here for too long. They had almost forgotten about the outside world. Jiang Fei replied with a smile. At this time, the snow beast had been taken away by him. The Gamma Dimension had lost its connection to the three-dimensional world. However, when it came to the Gamma Dimension, Jiang Fei could not help but feel a little dejected. Although the crisis had been solved, he still felt that he had let Lena down. Quick, tell us. Ariel immediately came over and hugged Jiang Fei's arm. Jiang Fei briefly explained the general situation to the two girls. Of course, he only briefly mentioned the details about Lena. Ariel was confused. Nina only understood a small part of it, but she could understand the difficulty. All right, it's getting late, Jiang Fei said with a smile. Nina asked. Jiang Fei used his origin power to wrap Nina and Ariel. Then, he teleported them to the foot of the mountain. Following that, the origin power in his body exploded, blasting away the surrounding trees and rocks. An empty space was cleared. Then, Jiang Fei released the special shuttle. Look, I drove this in, Jiang Fei said with a smile. Wow, so powerful. Has our technology reached such a level? Ariel asked curiously before they entered the black hole. Although Skoda had mastered the most powerful technology in the universe, they did not have the ability to do so. We do not have such technology. This is the legacy left behind by the mechs, Jiang Fei said with a smile. The mechs? Nina asked curiously. Jiang Fei nodded, then he continued. They had hidden this shuttle in the ring 10,000 years ago. They wanted me to save them. Although I did not know how they knew what would happen in 10,000 years, that is the truth. Save them? Are the mechs here too? Ariel asked curiously. According to the mech understanding of black holes, all black holes are connected. Jiang Fei asked. Seen them before? Ariel was confused. How is that possible? They're the Protoss that the Walloon race is talking about, Jiang Fei said. What? Protoss? How is that possible? Ariel and Nina cried out almost at the same time. Jiang Fei asked curiously. But Protoss are not a technological race. Nina explained. I'm also very curious about this. But that's not important. We just need to go home. Jiang Fei laughed. Ariel asked. Jiang Fei shrugged. Initially, Nina would have tried to persuade Jiang Fei. She was no longer as innocent as before. Therefore, she did not say anything. All right, let's not talk about it anymore. Jiang Fei waved his hand and stopped Ariel, who was about to say something else. Then he said to the two girls, this shuttle can only hold one person. So, I have to keep you both in the inherent space. You guys wait inside for a while. Then, we will be home. Nina and Ariel nodded. Although the inherit space was lonely, as long as they could go home, what was the big deal? Jiang Fei asked. Nina and Ariel nodded. Jiang Fei waved his hand and kept the two girls in the inherit space. He followed them in. When he saw that the two girls had been arranged, Jiang Fei then left the inheritance space. Phew! Jiang Fei stretched his back and smiled. After escaping from the black hole, the courage on his shoulders was completely removed. The threat of the gamma space was completely removed. The two girls who were trapped in the black hole were also rescued. The family could finally be together. When he thought of this, Jiang Fei could not help but smile. After opening the shuttle's cabin door, Jiang Fei sat inside and pressed the start button. Chapter 3007. 3007. Translator 549-6903. Unauthorized activation. Activation request denied. What? Jiang Fei was stunned as he looked at the red light flashing on the control panel. What's going on? I did not have so many requirements to pilot this thing when I came here. Jiang Fei muttered as he called 0544 over and over again. Jiang Fei asked, Captain, this shuttle has a preset authorization limit. Before entering the black hole, your captain's permission is free to fly. 0544 replied. Unlock the level 2 password. Jiang Fei asked. 0544 replied. F*CK. Jiang Fei immediately cursed. After 0544 said that, Jiang Fei understood. It was obvious that the mechs had been wary of him for 10,000 years. They knew that even if he entered the black hole, he might not be able to save the mechs. Therefore, they had locked the level 2 authorization after the shuttle entered the black hole. As long as the engine was turned off, it would be locked. Unless the level 2 password was activated, the power would be restored. Therefore, Jiang Fei had to find the nemesis. If he did not want to take him away, the Nemesis would definitely not hand over the password. Moreover, they could predict Jiang Fei's future development. They must have understood Jiang Fei's temper and knew that he would definitely keep his word. Otherwise, they would not have chosen him in the first place. After sighing, Jiang Fei waved his hand. At the same time that he released Nina and Ariel, he also put away the shuttle. Now that the shuttle could not be used, he had to find the Nemesis and find a way to obtain the level 2 password. Meanwhile, time in the inherent space was almost frozen. It was moving too slowly. Jiang Fei had been moving here for a day. Inside, Nina and Ariel seemed to have been locked up for a few years. Therefore, when he could not go home directly, he could only release the 2 girls first. Ariel asked, puzzled. Nina was also very confused. Jiang Fei awkwardly explained what had just happened to the 2 girls. The 2 girls looked at each other speechlessly. Who would have thought that the Mech would have thought of this 10,000 years ago? Jiang Fei said. Ariel asked worriedly. Jiang Fei was not very sure because the Mechs now seemed to be different from the Mech from 10,000 years ago. After that, Jiang Fei rode his sword and flew up. As Nina and Ariel had lived on this planet for a period of time, they had a better understanding of this place, especially the cities of the Merak people. These places were very easy to find. Jiang Fei suddenly remembered that when Nina entered the black hole, she was not alone. They were killed by the Protoss not long after they entered, Nina said. Jiang Fei was stunned. Sigh. Actually, we had no choice but to help the Walloon race. Because the Mechs were very xenophobic, they started attacking me as soon as they saw me. I could not survive here alone, so I could only live with a Kinder Walloon tribe. Later, Ariel came and was lucky enough to find me. So, the 2 of us helped that tribe together, Nina explained. Jiang Fei asked curiously. Nina said, she and Ariel had helped the tribe a lot. Previously, there were many slave hunters who came to capture them. The Walloon race in the Bretton Woods had set many traps and stopped the joint defense team. Therefore, the number of Namek people who came to capture the slaves had decreased by a lot. Other than helping the Walloons defend against the slave hunters, Nina and Ariel had also given the Walloons a lot of basic knowledge. Subsequently, this knowledge spread throughout the entire Walloons and even reached the ears of King Jacob. Therefore, he wanted to keep Nina and Ariel in the Walloons forever. However, this unlucky guy was unlucky. He had chosen the most inappropriate time, used the most inappropriate method, and even invited the most inappropriate person to be a witness. And so, tragedy happened. I wonder what happened to the people of planet Namek during these 10,000 years. Jiang Fei sighed to himself. Through his conversation with Nina, he had already understood some things about this planet. Originally, there was only one intelligent race on this planet, the Walloon race. However, after the appearance of the people of planet Namek, these people only moved around in some remote areas at the beginning. Because the Walloon race was very primitive, the land they controlled was limited, so they didn't care about the Namek people who came from outside, and both sides were peaceful. However, later, for some unknown reason, the Namek people changed. They began to expand, attack, and enslave the Walloon tribe they encountered. Therefore, they did not know what kind of situation the people of planet Namek were in. They only knew that they came to this planet in a very large city. However, since the people of planet Namek began to invade the Varun tribe, these people had already given up on technology and started to call themselves Celestials. The Varun tribe did not know the origins of this. Sigh. Jiang Fei nodded secretly. Then, he continued to ride his sword and flew towards one of the Mink people's cities. Ariel pointed into the distance and said, as she had stayed with the Valens for too long, she was already used to calling the Mink people the Celestials. Jiang Fei lowered his flying altitude. At this time, he had already seen the Namek city. Compared to a modern city, this city was considered very primitive and very backward. However, compared to the holy city of the Walloon race, this place was much more civilized and comfortable. Although the rows of houses were not high, they were all small 2-story brick structures. Moreover, the streets were neat and orderly, and the shops were orderly. Compared to the Walloon race's slum-like city, this place was much more civilized. Chapter 3008. 3008. Translator 549-6903. When they were about a kilometer away from the city walls of the Nemesis planet, Zhang Fei landed. After landing, Zhang Fei and the other two walked towards the city. The distance of kilometer was not too far. Zhang Fei and the other two had covered half of the distance in a few minutes. At this time, the two Nemesis Sentinels had also discovered the traces of Zhang Fei and the other two. Squeak! A loud arrow shot into the sky. The patrol team of the Nemesis was immediately alerted. What's going on? What's going on? Enemy! 3 aliens have been discovered. Where? Where are the aliens? They're at the East Gate. Soon, a large group of Nemesis came to surround Zhang Fei and the rest. There were several thousand of them. Most of them were armed with bows and spears. Only a few of them were armed with long swords or machetes. Seeing a large number of Planet Namex people surrounding them from all directions, Nina and Ariel were slightly nervous. However, Zhang Fei was still calm. They were not here to cause trouble, nor were they here to fight. Zhang Fei was not afraid. This time, Zhang Fei went to the city of Planet Namek. His purpose was very simple. He wanted to ask for the level 2 password. He would even take the Planet Namex people away and bring them to the outer universe. Zhang Fei would not hesitate to do so. Therefore, Zhang Fei thought that he was here to save these people. In a sense, he was the benefactor of the mechs. Therefore, he was not afraid. Soon, the large group of mechs surrounded Zhang Fei and the other two. They kept shrinking the circle. However, no one took the initiative to attack. Instead, they kept shrinking the range of Zhang Fei and the other two. Ariel asked nervously. They should be waiting for their leader. You don't have to be nervous. I will take care of everything. Zhang Fei comforted Ariel while giving Nina a reassuring look. Soon, Zhang Fei and the other two were reduced to a range of about 20 feet. Then, the people from Planet Namek stopped shrinking the circle. Ariel hid behind Zhang Fei. Lena was also nervous. Zhang Fei was very calm. He just waited quietly, waiting for the leader of the mechs to arrive. About 20 minutes later, a group of people came from afar. The leader of the mechs did not look very old. He should be in his prime. The meek people who were in their prime should be at least 300 years old. When the leader of the meek people arrived, the meek people who surrounded Zhang Fei and the others made way for him. This allowed the leader of the meek people to arrive in front of Zhang Fei and the others. Alien, why did you come to our city? The leader of the meek people asked. Déclarava? He, of course not. Zhang Fei smiled faintly. What? He killed King Jacob? Really? Are you kidding? That's right. How could he kill King Jacob? As soon as Zhang Fei said that, the surrounding mechs began to discuss among themselves. However, these people were more united in their opinions. They did not believe that Zhang Fei could kill King Jacob alone. You said that you killed Jacob. The leader of the mechs asked. What I said is proof, Zhang Fei said calmly. Nonsense. You must be a spy. The 2 aliens beside you are from the Walloon race. They often help the Walloon race. One of the mechs recognized Nina and Ariel. Because he had previously participated in the slave hunt in the Breton Woods, he was coincidentally stopped by Nina and Ariel. The leader of the mechs was stunned. Then he looked Zhang Fei and the other two up and down. Believe it or not, it's up to you. Also, you can ask someone to go to Westphalia to find out if I'm lying, Zhang Fei said calmly. The leading nemesis asked. He wanted to take my woman, so of course, I had to kill him, Zhang Fei said with a smile. The leading nemesis shrugged. The nemesis reproduced asexually. When they were about to die, they would spit out an egg. This egg could hatch 2 or 3 young mechs in a high-quality environment. Under normal conditions, it could only hatch 1 young mechs. If the conditions were too harsh, it would enter a dormant state. It was precisely because the way of reproduction was completely different that the mechs were completely unable to understand gender or love, because they did not need these things at all. I believe what you said for now. Although I do not know why you are here, I need to confirm what you just said. The leader of the mechs said. Zhang Fei was not in a hurry. After all, it was not a matter of time to get the level 2 password. Bring them into the city, the leader of the mechs said to the people around him. One of the mechs asked. No need. Just find a house for them to live in. However, don't let them run around, said the mechs who were known as castellans. Yes. The mechs agreed and brought Jiang Fei and the other two into the city. As Jiang Fei and the other two were not officially allowed into the inner city, they were not allowed to enter. Instead, they found a decent courtyard in the outer city and allowed them to stay there. However, the front and back doors of the courtyard were guarded by the merfolk. Even the outside of the courtyard walls were guarded by the merfolk. Clearly, Jiang Fei and the others were under house arrest. However, after thinking about it, Jiang Fei and the rest could understand. After all, Nina and Ariel were on the same side as the Valents. This was a publicly acknowledged fact among the mechs. Now that Jiang Fei had suddenly brought them to the city of the mechs, it was already very impressive that they were not captured as spies and tortured. Come, let's pack up. We will stay here for 2 days. This place is not close to Westphalia. With the current technological level of the mechs, they will need at least 2 to 3 days to get news from there. Jiang Fei estimated, currently, the fastest communication method of the mechs was to send a message through a bird. Chapter 3009, 3009. Translator, 549690-3. Jiang Fei and the 2 girls stayed in the Nemesis city for 3 days. On the 4th day, the 2 Nemesis came to the courtyard where they lived. One of the Nemesis said, clearly, they had received news from Westphalia that confirmed Jiang Fei's words. Jiang Fei nodded. Then, he brought Nina and Ariel out of the small courtyard. Following the 2 mechs, Jiang Fei and the other 2 arrived at the castellan's residence. Compared to Westphalia's royal palace, the castellan's residence was much more imposing. After passing through the first 2 floors of the courtyard, Jiang Fei and the 2 mechs led them to the outside of a hall. One of the Neptune waved at Jiang Fei and the other 2. Then, he walked into the hall alone. Jiang Fei and the other 2 stayed where they were. Then, they looked at their surroundings casually. This floor of the courtyard was rather elegant. Other than the hall in the middle, which was north of the hall, there was also a rockery corridor and a small goldfish pond in the courtyard. There were some fish in the goldfish pond that were used for ornamental purposes. The shapes of these fish were rather strange. Moreover, from Jiang Fei's aesthetic point of view, these ornamental fish looked more ferocious. However, it seemed that this was more in line with the beauty of the Nemesis planet. A moment later, the guy who had just brought Jiang Fei and the others and came out of the hall. Gumin, the castellan want to see you, the guy said to Jiang Fei and the other 2. Jiang Fei nodded and walked into the hall. Nina and Ariel followed closely behind him. After entering the hall, Jiang Fei noticed that other than the leader of the Nemesis, there were many other people in the hall. They seemed to be some of the more powerful people in the city. Perhaps they were the subordinates of the castellan. Jiang Fei nodded at the castellan who was sitting on top. Alien, we have confirmed what you said before, the castellan said directly. Jiang Fei nodded. All right, we can officially talk now. Now, tell me your name, the castellan said with a condescending tone. Jiang Fei glanced at the castellan. Although he had 42 million combat power, Jiang Fei did not care about that. Oh, the castellan had obviously never been treated like this before. Therefore, he looked at Jiang Fei with interest before he said, My name is Su Rue. Jiang Fei was slightly stunned. This name was very similar to the way he was named in his hometown. However, he also knew that it was just a similar pronunciation. It was impossible for the person in front of him to have the surname Su. He was only called Su Rue. As for the last surname, he clearly did not think that he had the right to know it. Su Rue said expressionlessly, Of course, my name is Jiang Fei. Jiang Fei said his real name. No one here knew him anyway. Other than Nina and Ariel, the other players had already died. When Su Rue heard this name, he clearly frowned. This name gave him a very familiar feeling, but he could not remember it. Su Rue shook his head and temporarily threw that familiar feeling aside. I'm here to bring you all out of this place, Jiang Fei said. Out of this place? Where? Su Rue frowned. Of course not. What use is there for me to have this city? Jiang Fei said truthfully. Planet. Su Rue was at a loss. 10,000 years was too long. 10,000 years without technology had caused them to completely forget about this knowledge. It was as if they belonged here, now, and in the past. Damn it. Zhang Fei's heart skipped a beat. It did not matter if these mech had forgotten where they came from. If they lost the level 2 password, wouldn't that be a scam? At this time, Zhang Fei could only choose the channel that he did not want to choose the most. Maleki replied. Zhang Fei did not ask Maleki to decipher the password previously. The main reason was that he knew how high the technological level of the Merak people was back then. With Maleki's level, it would definitely take a long time. Maleki asked. Zhang Fei took a deep breath. Although a year was a long time, if the Merak people completely lost the password, he could only wait. What's wrong? You look very surprised. Su Rue asked curiously. Zhang Fei saw that Su Rue knew nothing about these things, so he could only look for other Nemesis planet people. What did you just say? Suddenly, Su Rue's eyes widened. Zhang Fei repeated. Su Rue asked again. Zhang Fei said. He was different from Nina and Ariel. The two girls had been with the Walloon race for a long time, so they were used to calling Namek people Protoss. However, Zhang Fei was different. He was already used to calling the people of planet Namek. Su Rue stood up from his chair. Zhang Fei said, Black hole, black hole. Su Rue rushed up to Zhang Fei. Then, he stared at Zhang Fei and said slowly, You are the Zhang Fei from the prophecy. Ah! Zhang Fei was stunned. Recently, when he heard the word prophecy, he had become a little sensitive because there had been too many prophecies that involved him recently. However, in the blink of an eye, Zhang Fei said to Su Rue, The prophecy is actually true. Su Rue muttered to himself. The people of planet Namek below all had blank expressions on their faces. Clearly, they did not know about the prophecy. Chapter 3010, 3010. Translator, 549-6903, Zhang Fei asked with a smile. Su Rue pondered for a moment. Then, he waved at his subordinates and said, You guys can leave first. Yes. The other mechs in the hall dispersed. Only the city lord, Su Rue, and Zhang Fei were left. After the rest of the people had dispersed, Su Rue walked around Zhang Fei twice. He forced himself to calm down and then said to Zhang Fei, Does your appearance mean that the prophecy will come true? City Lord, whether the prophecy will come true or not, I can't answer you now because I need to know the content of the prophecy first. Maybe it's true, or maybe it's fake, Zhang Fei said with a faint smile. Su Rue nodded. Then he said to Zhang Fei, I accidentally saw this prophecy when I was very young. Now, I've already forgotten where the broken sheepskin scroll is. I can no longer repeat the original text of the prophecy, but I still remember the general meaning. Zhang Fei nodded. Su Rue organized his words. Then he said to Zhang Fei, The prophecy said that we were once a very developed race. We could even freely travel between the stars and travel in the universe. It described a very vast starry sky. Each of the planets was as colorful as our world. But later, an accident led to our destruction. We fell into this dusty world. Zhang Fei quietly listened to Su Rue's description. He did not disturb him. When we first arrived in this world, we had powerful technology. According to the prophecy, at that time, we had the ability to transform the starry sky. Even if we were sucked into this sealed world, we still relied on powerful technology to transform something called a star system, Su Rue said. His eyes were filled with longing. Zhang Fei nodded and gestured for Su Rue to continue. After that, for some reason, there was no detailed description in the prophecy. It seemed that there was a disagreement among us. Then, a civil war broke out. This civil war seemed to have broken out between the two planets. I could not quite understand the description during that time. Su Rue said. Zhang Fei did not pay too much attention to the details. The result of the war was that we were completely divided. Our branch remained, and those who left disappeared forever, Su Rue said. Zhang Fei asked curiously. According to the prophecy, because of that war, we lost 90% of our population. Those who survived thought that it was the overly developed technology that led us into the abyss. If it was not for that technology, we would not have been sucked into this sealed world. If it was not for that technology, even if we had internal disagreements, even if we had a civil war, we would not have lost more than 90% of our population. Therefore, in the end, under the decision of the Elder Council, we destroyed all the weapons, sealed all the technology, and then started all over again. From then on, we called ourselves the Protoss, which means the chosen ones or the survivors. Su Rue said with a heavy face. This is history, Zhang Fei asked curiously. If it's only here, then it's history. However, it also describes one thing. 10,000 years after we lose our technology, an alien called Zhang Fei will come here. He will help us regain the power of our technology. He will help us leave this dust-covered world. He will lead us back to becoming the people of planet Namek. Zhang Fei's expression suddenly became excited. Do you really yearn for that kind of life? Zhang Fei asked curiously. Ever since I saw that scroll when I was young, I have been dreaming almost every day. In my dreams, it was the beautiful world described in the scroll. Moreover, I do not think that the destruction was caused by technology. According to the description in the scroll, technological knowledge is a kind of power. The destruction was caused by the improper use of human beings. Su Rue's words made Zhang Fei very surprised. He did not expect this guy who lived in the primitive stage to have such thoughts. You are right. That is indeed the case. Technology is not the root of destruction. Zhang Fei nodded. Then, can you answer me now? Su Rue asked. I can't really guarantee that I will be able to return to the glory of the past. However, I have come this time to bring you all out of this place, said Zhang Fei. Leave this place? Asked Su Rue. To the outside world. It is also the place where your former home is located, said Zhang Fei. Su Rue did not just want to go out. He wanted to live the kind of life described in the scroll. The rest, the outside world, does have the technology described in the scroll. However, if you want to learn it, it is not a quick thing. However, you can choose to blend in. That way, you can quickly enjoy the fruits of technology, Zhang Fei said. We have lost technology for so many years. Su Rue asked. About that, I'm not lying to you. What do you think of the score? If we were talking about military technology, that is indeed the case. The Mechs were not particularly obsessed with it back then. Now, the outside world is indeed more powerful in this aspect. Zhang Fei sighed. Not a single civilization in the outer universe could change a galaxy and create a planet. Even so, it's still better than this boring life. Su Rue was impatient. Zhang Fei shook his head. Why? Su Rue's expression was not very good. Sigh. It's not that I don't want to. Zhang Fei sighed. Su Rue was confused. Everything was designed by your ancestor. He was afraid that I would not take you away, so he designed the barrier. It requires a level 2 password to open it. Zhang Fei shrugged. Chapter 3011. 3011. Translator 549-6903. Su Rue was confused. You don't know either? Zhang Fei was also stunned. Who knows? I was young at that time. I was only interested in stories. Who would pay attention to whether there was a password or not? Even if there was, it has been almost 200 years. Su Rue shook his head. Zhang Fei was speechless. Why don't you guys follow me home to look for it? Su Rue said. Zhang Fei asked. This small city is my territory. We have to go back to my home. The scroll is in my family's library, Su Rue said. Zhang Fei asked. St. Helena, 3,000 miles to the east. When Su Rue mentioned St. Helena, his face was full of pride. Zhang Fei asked, Ride the unicorn. This thing is very fast. It will take about 2 to 3 days to get there, said Su Rue. Zhang Fei nodded. Although the fastest way was for him to put Su Rue into the inheritance space and fly there on his sword, Su Rue might not agree to it. Moreover, Su Rue was not weak. Forcefully putting him into the inheritance space would put a huge burden on Zhang Fei. Speaking of which, Zhang Fei had to rely on the inheritance space to bring the merfolk out of the black hole. Previously, Zhang Fei had wanted to bring Mina and Ariel home directly. He did not care about the merfolk because he had considered the burden, putting so many powerful merfolk into the inheritance space. Unless Jiang Fei spent a lot of time loading them little by little, the burden alone would be enough to kill him. Jiang Fei did not object to helping others. However, he was not that noble. It would not be a problem for him to lend a hand. Jiang Fei was not that noble. However, the situation was different now. If Jiang Fei wanted to get the level 2 password, he had to take the nemesis away. Even if some of them were already used to living like this, they did not want to leave anymore. However, there would still be some people who wanted to leave the black hole like Su Rui. Therefore, Jiang Fei had to take them with him. That way, he would have to think of a way. Otherwise, there would be so many experts who would need to be taken into the inheritance space. That was really hard on him. However, since the people of planet Namek had predicted so many things 10,000 years ago, they must have also thought of Jiang Fei's current problems. Therefore, they might have left behind solution. Due to Su Rui's quick temper, he simply handed over the management of the city to his subordinates. After that, he got his men to prepare 4 unicorns and the corresponding supplies. Then, Jiang Fei and the rest set off. On the way, Su Rui asked Jiang Fei. Jiang Fei pondered for a moment. Then he said, "It depends on whether your ancestors left any solutions behind. If they did not, it would be good enough if I could bring out 180 people. Of course, if they came up with a solution, it would be okay to bring all of them out." Su Rui was stunned. "Yes, but I think they must have left a solution behind. Otherwise, if I were to bring out 180 people, it would not be enough to waste time." Jiang Fei said with a smile, "Perhaps. However, no matter what, you have to take me out." "I don't want to stay in this place anymore," said Su Rui. Jiang Fei asked curiously, "Every day is the same. Every day is the same. I can almost see the day I die," said Su Rui, unhappily. Jiang Fei asked, "Actually, there are not many. After all, not everyone knows about different lives. I only have that kind of yearning because I have read the records in the scroll. Other people, from birth to death, can only see what is in front of them. So, they don't think much of it," said Su Rui. Jiang Fei nodded. "So, for a long time, I felt that God was unfair to me. He should not have let me know about that kind of different world. That way, I would be able to settle down in my current life," said Su Rui, suddenly with a smile. Then he continued, "But now, it's good. Fortunately, I've seen that scroll. That's why I knew about you. Otherwise, I would have missed you. If that was the case, I would not have had the chance to leave this boring world. Perhaps this is fate," Jiang Fei said. Su Rui said. Jiang Fei was stunned. "Look, it's just like what you said. My ancestors had designed everything 10,000 years ago. It's hard to guarantee that when I was young, I saw that the scroll was not arranged by them," Su Rui said. Jiang Fei did not say anything. However, he thought to himself, if that was really the case, it would be too scary. The feeling of being treated like a marionette was very bad. It was not that Jiang Fei had not tried to break free. However, no matter what choice he made, it seemed that he would not be able to escape the expectations of those people 10,000 years ago. In the end, he was finally guided back to the path that they had hoped for. It had to be said that the unicorn was indeed very fast. Jiang Fei and the rest had covered over 1,000 miles in one day. When it was evening, Jiang Fei and the rest got off the unicorn's back and set up a tent. Then they prepared to rest for the night. The unicorns also began to eat grass and drink water. They took the opportunity to recover their strength. Although Su Rui had prepared some necessary supplies, including food, Jiang Fei could not quite accept the taste of the people of planet Namek. These people's eating habits were more similar to the lizard people. They liked to eat all kinds of insects. Jiang Fei could barely accept these things. However, Nina and Ariel could not accept it at all. They felt disgusted just by looking at it, let alone eating it. Fortunately, Jiang Fei's inheritance space had enough food and water. Therefore, the 3 of them did not have to force themselves to eat the food that was difficult to swallow. Similarly, Su Rui felt that the food that Jiang Fei and the others ate was too disgusting. Therefore, he did not touch their food. He only ate the various dried worms that he brought with him with great relish. After a simple night's rest, Jiang Fei and the rest continued on their journey. They rode on their unicorns and sped in the direction of St. Helena. Chapter 3012. Translator 549-6903. On the way, Jiang Fei and the rest did not encounter any obstacles. They arrived at St. Helena on the morning of the third day. Su Rue said as he pointed at the towering city in front of them. Unlike modern cities like Jiang Fei and the rest, all the Protoss cities, including St. Helena, had city walls. Moreover, these city walls were dozens of meters tall. For a capital city like St. Helena, its city walls were so tall that they reached the clouds. Nina muttered to herself. Yeah, Ariel praised from the side. They had seen modern cities before. Although there were many tall buildings, such tall city walls did not exist. In modern cities, city walls did not have any defense function. Whether it was missiles, energy cannons, or other technological weapons, they could easily destroy the city walls. Therefore, for modern races, it was extremely uneconomical to build city walls. With the spare money, it was better to develop new equipment. However, for the Protoss, which had technology compared to primitive races, the city walls were a solid defense. However, both of them had lived with the Wallen race. Those people were simply too weak to build such a magnificent city. Compared to St. Helena, the city wall was like a fence. That was why Nina and Ariel were so shocked when they saw St. Helena. Actually, it was not just Nina and Ariel. Even Jiang Fei was excited when he saw such a magnificent city. How is it? It's very magnificent, isn't it? When Su Rue mentioned the capital, he had a proud look on his face. It was a pride that came from the bottom of his heart. Jiang Fei nodded. However, he had mixed feelings in his heart. Back then, the people of planet Merak were a super technological civilization that could transform galaxies and even build planets. However, now they were only smug because of a city wall that was dozens of meters tall. It had to be said that it was a kind of irony. Jiang Fei sighed. These Protoss had completely forgotten what technology was. They were counting on them to learn it from scratch. It was unknown how long it would take for them to regain the technological level of the mechs back then. Following behind, Su Rue, Jiang Fei, and the others quickly arrived at the city gate. The city gate of the capital, St. Helena, would be opened early in the morning. Although there were guards on duty, the defense was not tight. The guards would roughly check the pedestrians who entered the gate. As long as they were Celestials, they would happily let them pass. The Walloon people who entered the city gate would have to undergo a strict inspection. Only those with the Master's family emblem on their bodies would be allowed to pass. This was because these imprints were the proof of their identity as slaves. Only this could prove that they were the property of the Celestials. Only then would they be qualified to enter the city. However, if they were not the slaves of the Protoss, why would a free Valen come to St. Helena? Could it be that they were taking the initiative to become slaves of others? When Jiang Fei and the others were about to enter the city, the guards stopped them. The captain of the guards asked. "They came with me," said Su Rue, who was walking at the back. The captain of the guards and his subordinates immediately greeted Su Rue when they saw him. "Oh, Your Highness?" Jiang Fei laughed in his heart. He initially thought that Su Rue was a direct descendant of a big family. He did not expect that Su Rue was also from the royal family. Although the mechs were parthenogenetic, they also had a family system. After all, after the death of a mechs, it was possible for them to spit out more than one egg. That was why the population of the mechs had increased. In this way, two new lives that came from the same mother would definitely have a bond and kinship between them. As a result, their descendants would gradually form an intimate relationship. One family after another naturally formed. "And I'm Buck. They're all with me," Su Rue said. "Your Highness, the origins of these aliens are unknown." The captain of the guards was somewhat hesitant. "It's fine. If anything happens, I'll take responsibility, and I'll explain it to my royal brother," Su Rue said to the captain of the guards. Since Su Rue had said so, the guard captain did not dare to say anything more. Therefore, he led his men to the side, Jiang Fei and the two girls rode their unicorns and entered the celestial capital, St. Helena. Let's go, Su Rui said to Jiang Fei and the others. Jiang Fei asked curiously. He's my big brother, Su Rui said with a smile. He saw Jiang Fei as the savior of the prophecy. Therefore, he naturally would not hide anything from Jiang Fei. In fact, Su Rui and the current Celestial King were both hatched from the eggs that the previous Celestial King had spat out before he died. However, the old Celestial King had spat out 2 eggs before he died. Therefore, 2 celestial races were hatched. One of them inherited the throne. Meanwhile, Su Rui was conferred the title of City Lord in a wealthy city. However, because he was blood-related to the Celestial King, Su Rui enjoyed a high status in the entire celestial race. Moreover, he could enter and leave the palace as he pleased. He could even bring a few strangers with him. Let's go. When they entered the palace, it was very smooth. As all the guards knew Su Rui, they did not dare to stop them even if they saw Jiang Fei and the others. They quickly sent someone to inform the current Celestial King, which was Su Rui's brother, Suja. Jiang Fei's purpose for coming here was to find the level 2 password. Therefore, he was now focused on looking at the scroll that Su Rui had seen when he was young. As for whether or not he would see the current Celestial King, Jiang Fei did not really care. Soon, Su Rui and the others arrived at the library. This was the forbidden area of the Celestial's palace. Although Su Rui could enter freely, even if it was Jiang Fei and the others that he brought with him, the guards would not dare to let them in easily. Your Highness, of course, we do not dare to stop you from entering. However, we really do not dare to make decisions for these aliens, said the official who was guarding the library. Chapter 3013, 3013. Translator, 549-6903. You guys wait here. Su Rui had no other choice. He didn't want to use his identity to pressure these servants, so he could only go to his big brother. Moreover, in Su Rui's opinion, this matter was a good thing for the entire God Clan. Once the God Clan could regain their former glory and become the people of planet Namek again, their strength would be greatly expanded. Just as Su Rui was about to go to the main hall to look for his big brother, a deep voice came from not far away. No need. I'm already here. As the voice fell, a figure appeared in front of Su Rui. Jiang Fei looked up and down at the newly appeared nemesis from behind. According to the data of the combat strength tester, this guy's combat strength was as high as 48 million. He could already be considered as a top-notch expert. Hey! Su Rui immediately smiled happily when he saw the person who appeared. The person who appeared on the spot was none other than Su Rui's big brother, the current godly king, Suja. Humph! You're home. Why didn't you come to see me first? Suja said as he rolled his eyes at Su Rui. However, his tone was full of indulgence and did not have any intention of blaming him. Su Rui smiled sheepishly. What urgent matter? Suja asked. Su Rui then told Suja about Jiang Fei's background and the matter about the scroll. Su se froned. I'm very sure. I remember the things in the scroll clearly since I was young. Su Rui godentiv. Suja frowned as he looked at Jiang Fei and the others. Then he said, You must be very tired after coming all the way here. There is no hurry to look for information. Since Su Rui found the scroll in the library, it cannot be lost. You can go and rest first. Tomorrow, I will arrange some people to look for the scroll with you. This library is too big. If it is just a few of you, I don't know when you will be able to find it. Thank you for your kind words, Celestial King. Jiang Fei was new to this place. Of course, he did not want to offend this Celestial King. However, although this Celestial King Suja was very polite, Jiang Fei felt that this guy was not what he appeared to be. He might not be able to get Jiang Fei and the others to look for the scroll so easily. He might even send someone to take the scroll away in advance. Although Jiang Fei felt that the Celestial King might have other motives, Jiang Fei did not directly clash with him because he still did not know what the level 2 password was. Therefore, Jiang Fei did not want to offend the people of planet Namek who had lost their memories so as to not affect his journey home. Su Rui still wanted to fight for it. He was a hot-tempered person. If you asked him to come back tomorrow, he really could not wait any longer. All right, we have not seen each other for a long time. Let's go, Suja said. He waved his hand, and someone came up to Jiang Fei and the other two. Then he said to them, "Please, the three of you." Jiang Fei did not want to get up too early to fight. He nodded. Then he brought the two girls and followed the guy to a side hall. Although this place had been empty for a long time, it was still clean. Moreover, there were all kinds of things that could be used. It was not a bad thing to live here. After leaving Jiang Fei and the others here, the servant brought them some food and water and left. Jiang Fei and the others were clearly not interested in food like dried insects. After they threw all these things aside, Jiang Fei took out some delicious food from his ring space and started chatting with the two girls. Jiang Fei asked first, "I don't know, but one thing is for sure. He doesn't seem to welcome us very much," Nina said. "Oh, why doesn't he welcome us?" Jiang Fei asked curiously. Nina shook her head. "Who cares?" Ariel was very open-minded. Jiang Fei nodded. He could not release his mind power now. He could not use many of his scouting methods anymore. Moreover, Suja was very powerful. If Jiang Fei listened to the window, the chances of him being discovered were very high. Just as Jiang Fei and the two girls were discussing, Suja pulled Su Rue to a large hall. At this time, the hall had already prepared food and wine. Although the giant insect jerky was not very acceptable to Jiang Fei and the other two, it was still a delicacy for the celestial race. To Su Rue and the rest of the Protoss, it was a delicacy. Sitting in front of the wine table, Su Rue asked with some dissatisfaction, "Brother, I still have business today. Why are you dragging me to drink?" "What business?" Suja asked. "That's right," Su Rue said. "Leave?" Suja asked. "Of course, to the outside world." "Brother, you don't know." Su Rue then told Suja what Jiang Fei had described previously. It's indeed very tempting, but who can prove that this is true?" Suja asked. Su Rue asked back. "Then who knows? Prophecies are not necessarily accurate," Suja said. "Even if there's only a small possibility, I will try. I just want to go out." Su Rue said, "But have you ever thought that once we leave this place, or if the people under US control the technology that you mentioned, then can we still maintain our current rule?" Suja finally voiced out the worries in his heart. "I don't care. I'm not interested in power to begin with. Brother, if you can't bear to leave, you don't have to go out." Su Rue said, "Brother, why don't you understand? Their time is almost up, and they're coming back." Suja said, "They're coming." Su Rue was stunned. "Didn't you open your mouth and shut your mouth? Did you forget that the 10,000-year pact is coming soon? Once we are defeated, then we are nothing," Suja said anxiously. Chapter 3014, 3014. Translator, 549-6903. That's why we should help Jiang Fei. Surui said to Suja. Suja was stunned. "Brother, think about it. Jiang Fei found us first. This is our chance." Su Rue paused for a moment. Then he continued, "Brother, according to the prophecy, Jiang Fei is the key person. Not only can he lead us out of here, but he can also bring us back to the glory of the past." "Brother, what is the glory of the past?" "It is something that can destroy the world. It is called technology. Once we have mastered this, will it still be a problem to defeat those people?" Suja hesitated for a moment before he asked, "Are you so sure that Jiang Fei will help us? And why would he help us? He must have his own motives." "Brother, I have already asked. Jiang Fei does have his own motives. He needs something called a level 2 password. After he gets that level 2 password, he can leave this world and return to his own world. When he leaves, he can also take some people with him. Brother, if you're not willing to leave, I will take some people with him after we have dealt with those people. You can continue to stay here and be your God King," Su Rue said to Suja. Although Suja was reluctant to give up the throne under his, but he could not admit it. "All right, brother, I understand you." So Rui smiled. He was not interested in power at all. Was Suja doing it for the chair under his, or did he not want to take the risk of going to another world? To Su Rue, this was nothing else. Anyway, he had already made up his mind to leave, so Suja would definitely choose to stay. As for the reason, it was no longer important. Hey, Suja sighed and asked Surue. Then who knows? But there's one thing, brother. Surue asked. No, we can't leave this planet at all. If they can come here from the second home, we won't be able to defeat them, Suja said. Isn't that the end of it? We can't defeat them anyway. Let Jiang Fei try. Surue continued to persuade him. In order to leave this place with Jiang Fei, he had tried his best to persuade Suja. He had really spared no effort. Suja was still looking for an excuse. Brother, what time is it now? Surue grabbed Suja's shoulder and asked. Suja was still a little hesitant. There's no buts, brother. Even if the other party loses their technology, we can still fight them after we master the technology. Surue used his trump card. All right, it won't get any worse. I'll listen to you. Suja finally decided. He did not want to leave this place, but the doubling of the territory had indeed moved him. As a king, no one would not want to expand their territory. Suja was no exception. That's great, brother, Surue said. No need. I'll get someone to deliver the scroll to you later, said Suja as he waved his hand. He had already gotten someone to find the scroll and put it away. At first, he did not want Jiang Fei to open up the technology domain. Naturally, he did not want Surue to find the scroll. However, Surue was his biological brother, so he could not say it out loud. Therefore, he could only secretly get someone to hide the scroll while he was drinking. Now that Suja was convinced, there was no need for him to hide the scroll anymore. Surue and Suja drank a few more glasses of wine and then rushed to find Jiang Fei. He could not wait to share the good news with Jiang Fei. Seeing that Surue had run out of the main hall, Suja picked up his wine glass and took a sip. Then he sighed and said, I don't know if this choice is right or wrong. Technology, is it really that powerful? On the other side, Surue ran all the way to the side hall where Jiang Fei and the others were staying. Jiang Fei! Jiang Fei! Surue shouted loudly as if he was afraid that Jiang Fei would not hear him. Oh! Jiang Fei came out from the main hall to welcome him. He thought that Surue had come with the scroll. However, when he saw that Surue was empty-handed, he could not help but feel a little disappointed. Surue said with a smile, That's fine. We are eating. Jiang Fei said politely, Forget it. Surue waved his hand. Not only was Jiang Fei unable to adapt to the food habits of the people of planet Namek, they also could not stand the food that Jiang Fei and the others ate. All right then. Jiang Fei returned to the dining table and continued to eat with the two girls. Surue turned around. The difference in aesthetic and cultural differences was still quite big. He even felt that Jiang Fei and the others' dishes were a little disgusting. While Jiang Fei and the others were eating, Surue had been waiting. About 20 minutes later, two Protoss guards ran over. One of them was holding a long box in his hand. Hee. Surue ran out in 2 steps and took the box. When Surue returned, Jiang Fei and the other two put down their bowls and chopsticks. Jiang Fei said with a smile after taking the scroll from Surue. As the box was opened, Jiang Fei placed the scroll on the table and began to open it from the side. As the scroll was opened, the contents of the scroll were revealed. As Jiang Fei and the other two were proficient in the Nemesis language, it was not difficult for them to read the scroll. The first half of the scroll was just like what Surue had said. It recorded some things about the Nemesis, including how they were sucked into the black hole and how they modified the galaxy. Through reading, Jiang Fei understood the whole process more thoroughly. Before this, when Surue saw the scroll, he was still young. After so many years, he only had a vague impression of some of the stories. Therefore, after reviewing the scroll, the glory of the Nemesis in the past was once again displayed in front of him. Moreover, as he grew older, this time, Surue had a deeper understanding of that kind of brilliant technology. Therefore, he became even more yearning for the outside world. Chapter 3015, 3015. Translator, 549-6903. As the scroll gradually unfolded, the history of the Nemesis coming to this planet gradually came to an end. The general situation was similar to what Surue had described, except that the details were more complete Jiang Fei was not very concerned about this part. When the history part was over, it was time for the content of the prophecy. In the scroll, in order to increase the credibility, it not only predicted Jiang Fei's arrival, but also that he would lead the Protoss to regain the glory of the Nemesis. It also predicted some other major events. Through verification with Su Rui, this prophecy from 10,000 years ago accurately predicted these major events. There was not the slightest mistake. It was precisely because Su Rui's family had mastered this scroll that they became the royal family of the Mechs after the division of the Mechs. Su Rui's ancestors had learned a lot of things from the prophecy. That was how they obtained power and status. However, the prophecy in the scroll ended 1,000 years ago. Only Jiang Fei was left. Therefore, it lost most of its meaning. He had almost forgotten about this scroll. If Su Rui had not really brought back the Jiang Fei mentioned in the prophecy. In fact, the main reason why Su Zhe did not want Jiang Fei to obtain the scroll in the first place was because he had seen the scroll before and knew the contents of it. Moreover, the last prophecy did not mention him. It also did not mention who would end up with the throne after regaining the glory of planet Namek. Su Zhe was worried that when Jiang Fei led everyone to regain the glory of planet Namek, he would seize the throne that should have belonged to him. That was why he tried so hard to stop him. However, when Su Rui made a promise that they would all leave this place and go to another world, Su Zhe was relieved. He knew his brother very well. He knew that Su Rui would never lie to him. If these people would eventually choose to leave, and he could also obtain the technology left behind by his ancestors, it would indeed be beneficial to him. Moreover, the most fatal thing was that on another habitable planet far away, the other Namek people would immediately follow the agreement to fight against the Namek people led by Su Zhe. 10,000 years ago, when the two Namek people broke off, they made an agreement that each Namek people would live according to their own ways. Until 10,000 years later, they would fight to determine who was right and who was wrong. The winner would be the one who made the right choice, and the loser would follow the winner's way of life and live the way they wanted. Although, in the promise, both sides would live together as equals after the battle, but the way of life would be decided by the winner. But as the leader of one of the teams, Su Zhe would be the winner. If he became the winner, he would definitely turn the other Nam-Mechs into his slaves, and then occupy the other's city and plunder the other's wealth. Su Zhe was certain that if the other party won, they would treat his people the same way. Due to the fear of becoming someone else's slave and the fear of losing his power, coupled with Su Rui's persuasion and assurance, Su Zhe finally changed his mind and sent the scroll over. Damn it! The more Jiang Fei looked at it, the more shocked he became. Although he had been thoroughly arranged by the people of planet Namek 10,000 years ago, until now, he was still amazed. At the same time, Jiang Fei was also feeling sad for the people of planet Namek now. If they could inherit 1% of their ancestors' abilities, they would not have ended up like this. However, although he was amazed, he was still surprised. Jiang Fei was most concerned about the level 2 password. In the end, the scroll did not mention a single word about the level 2 password. How is this possible? Jiang Fei was dumbfounded. Ah Fei, look, this scroll is not complete. Nina was more sensitive. She noticed that when the scroll ended, it was not the same as the beginning. It was perfectly framed. Although the end of the scroll was very neat, it was directly made of sheepskin. It was very likely that someone had cut it open with a knife. Jiang Fei immediately looked at Su Rui. I don't know. Su Rui was also at a loss. Jiang Fei suddenly had an idea. Su Rui immediately asked. Jiang Fei's mouth twitched as he said. Needless to say, this must have been arranged by the Nemesis 10,000 years ago. They were afraid that Jiang Fei would only take one Nemesis with him. So they split the scroll into 2 parts. Sigh. Jiang Fei sighed and then said to Su Rui, let's talk about the other Nemesis. As the scroll did not record anything about the battle 10,000 years later, Jiang Fei did not know that the other Nemesis would come over very soon. Su Rui frowned and said to Jiang Fei, I only know a general idea about this. You can ask my brother for the details. Jiang Fei nodded. Then, Su brought Jiang Fei and the other two to the hall where Suja was. "Brother, Jiang Fei wants to know about those people," Su said directly to Suja. Susenadif. Then he gave Jiang Fei a simple description of the 10,000-year agreement and the other nemesis. According to Suja, when the nemesis split up, the side that supported the ceiling of technology was the majority. Only a few people disagreed. However, these people were, after all, a minority. They could not affect the overall situation. In the end, these people were exiled. They were sent to a transport ship and sent to the newly built habitable planet. The spaceship only had some simple basic technology because they had agreed to a 10,000-year war. The people who occupied the absolute majority would naturally not hand over the destructive technology or weapons to these few people. Jiang Fei let out a sigh of relief after listening to it. If the other group of Namechs had mastered the most advanced technology from 10,000 years ago, Jiang Fei could just give up. That was definitely not something that he could fight alone. Even if he included the group of Namechs that had already become Celestials, he could not do it. Chapter 3016. Translator 549-6903. Although the exiled Namek people who went to another planet only took away some basic technology and weapons they had developed for 10,000 years. As long as he maintained his desire for technology after 10,000 years of development, the technological power of the Namek people would definitely be terrifying. Therefore, in the face of such a threat, Jiang Fei did not think that he could change the current situation by himself. Su Rui asked, "Our priority now is to quickly pick up the technology that we have given up while there is still time," Jiang Fei said. "Pick it up? It's easier said than done. We have already given up on technology for too many years. Now, we have already forgotten all the basic knowledge." Suja said with a depressed look, "Hee, it is not easy to regain the knowledge of technology. Of course, it is not something that can be done in a day or two." Jiang Fei smiled. Jiang Fei came from a space where technology was highly developed. He knew that the more advanced the technology, the easier it was to use and operate the weapons it created. One would need a mathematician to calculate the parabola at the side. However, in the end, launching a missile was just a matter of pressing a button. Things like automatic enemy hunting, ballistic calculation, speed change, and penetration did not need anyone to care about these things. The rest of the missiles would be done on their own. In a highly developed technological society, research and development and manufacturing required high-tech talents. However, the users of the terminal did not need to have too much knowledge. The easier it was to operate, the easier it was to maintain the equipment. This was the equipment that was more popular. Therefore, Jiang Fei could almost be sure that the Nemesis Star people who had developed their technology 10,000 years ago were the same. Their weapons might have used a lot of cutting-edge technology that even Jiang Fei could not understand. However, these weapons and equipment would not be particularly difficult to use. There was no need for professional personnel to guide them. As long as they could see the ancient Nemesis Star language, they would be able to learn it quickly according to the instruction manual. Jiang Fei was precisely the person who knew the Nemesis Star language from 10,000 years ago. Therefore, in Jiang Fei's opinion, the most important thing now was to find the treasure house that had sealed the technological weapons in the past. Then he would pick out all the available weapons and organize a centralized training for the Protoss. He wanted them to learn how to use these weapons in the shortest possible time. Although the Protoss had completely abandoned technology, causing them to have no factories to continue producing weapons. Once these weapons ran out of ammunition, Suja and the Protoss under him would be instantly beaten back to their original state. With these weapons left behind by the Protoss tens of thousands of years ago, they would be able to defeat their opponents in a short period of time. Although the exiled Namek people were interested in technology, they had a fatal flaw, which was that they were few in number. The unique breeding method of the Namek people also made it impossible for them to quickly expand their population. As a result, even if the exiled Namek people had lived for 10,000 years, their numbers could not have doubled. Having fewer people was the fatal flaw of those people. Jiang Fei led the Protoss to use the great weapon left behind by the Na-Mechs. In the first round of attacks, they dealt enough damage to the other Na-Mechs. Jiang Fei believed that they would definitely surrender. After hearing Jiang Fei's request, Suja fell silent. Su Rui asked, "But the elders won't agree to open the seal," Suja said worriedly. "Who cares about them? What if they agree?" Su Rui was very straightforward. Suja nodded and agreed to Jiang Fei's request. "Everyone, take a rest first." Suja greeted Jiang Fei and the other two. Then, he said to Su Rui, Come with me. Let's see if we can convince them." "All right." Su Rui nodded and followed Suja out of the side hall. Jiang Fei and the two girls stayed in the side hall to recuperate. At the same time, they waited for the results of Suja and Su Rui's persuasion. On the other side, Suja and Su Rui returned to the main hall of the palace. Then, Suja called the elders over. Suja asked when he saw that all the elders had arrived. The elders shook their heads. "The 10,000-year pact is coming." Suja asked with a frown. 10,000-year pact? What is that? A few young members of the Elder Council looked confused. The 10,000-year pact is coming. How can it be so fast? Your Majesty, are we sure that we can defeat the other party now? The older members of the Elder Council also became anxious when they thought of this matter. Apparently, they had completely forgotten about this matter previously. "You guys," Suja sighed and then signaled Su Rui with his eyes. Thus, Su Rui stepped forward and said, "Everyone, the 10,000-year pact is about to come. You have all seen the situation of our God clan. Once those people return, we will definitely not be their match. In the end, we will definitely become their slaves." Your Majesty, please think of something." Hearing Su Rui's words, the elders became anxious. Those young elders had also learned the whole story from the others. "There is a solution." Suja nodded and signaled Su Rui to tell them the solution. Su Rui said, "That's great. Then we can be at ease." As soon as Su Rui's words left his mouth, the elders who were originally quite worried immediately relaxed. They were also used to being pampered. Now that they were suddenly faced with a crisis, they were somewhat distracted. However, the Savior has a request. Or rather, this is the only way for us to save ourselves. Su Rui got to the point. Chapter 3017. Translator 549-6903. Before Su Rui could finish his sentence, a few elders stood up to oppose. Why? Su Rui was very confused. Opening the seal and obtaining these ancient weapons could defeat the exiles. What was so bad about that? An elder questioned. This ancestral teachings of planet Namek was the sealing technology starting from scratch. But what time is it now? So Rui questioned. Exclamation point. If we open the seal, then what difference will there be between us and those exiles? Even if we defeat them, we will also start using technology as a weapon. Another elder questioned. When the Mechs split up, the main contradiction was their attitude towards technology. Those who insisted on using technology were exiled, while the majority of the remaining Mechs did not want to use technology anymore. Then, both sides made a 10,000-year pact, trying to judge who made the right choice through war. Just as the elders said, if Suja and the others opened the seal and obtained the technological weapons, then even if they won the war, wouldn't the conclusion of the 10,000-year pact still be to use technology? Then, the final winners would still be those Mechs who had been exiled. At what point in time do you still care about these things? Since we don't use technological weapons, the other party will still win. If we use them, the other party will still win. Then why don't we use them? Su Rui's reaction was also very quick. This 10,000-year war was already meaningless. The answer would definitely be to use technology to obtain a better life. However, the difference was whether they would be the victors or continue to live as slaves of others. No, the elders were very stubborn. No matter how much Su Rui tried to persuade them, they were unmoved. Finally, Su Rui looked at Suja. Suja was also in a difficult position. Although he was a godly king, his authority was also restricted by the Elders Guild. Moreover, Not all the keys to the treasure vault that sealed technology were in his hands. They were kept by him and the Elders Guild respectively. Only one key could not open the treasure house. These elders were also determined and refused to give in. "Are you?" Surue was about to cry. He felt that this choice was very simple. There was no suspense in the 10,000-year competition. Of course, it was a choice that was beneficial to him. Why were those elders so stubborn? The elders bowed to Suja and then left. "Brother," Surue was so angry that he could not speak. Suja also sighed. It was impossible to kill all these elders and then confiscate their homes, unless he wanted to force his subordinates to rebel. Forget it. No matter what, let's go talk to Jiang Fei and the others first. Surue sighed when he saw that his brother was also in trouble. Susenadith. Then, he followed Surue back to the side hall, where Jiang Fei and the others were. Jiang Fei asked when he saw that they had returned. "Sai." Surui directly guessed, because from his point of view, he could not understand the decision that these elders had made. Jiang Fei nodded after listening to Su Rui's description. Then he looked at Suja and asked, "Your Majesty, what do you think?" "Me?" Suja said. Jiang Fei nodded. Then he said to Suja and Su Rui, "As long as you want to open the treasure vault, I have other ways." Suja and Su Rui looked at Jiang Fei. Actually, Jiang Fei could understand the elder's choice. After all, their mission was to supervise the key to the treasure vault and ensure that the seal would not be opened. Then, they would use the 10,000-year pact to prove that their original choice was correct. These elders usually did not participate in government affairs. They did not have to care about the lives of the common people. They also did not have any power to be greedy for. Therefore, the faith in their hearts was the most pure and pure. Faith was actually not something that could be reasoned with. The elders were dedicated to their faith. They did not care even if they died or became slaves. There were many people who died for their faith. However, although Jiang Fei could understand the elders' faith, it was in conflict with his interests. Therefore, he could only apologize to the elders. When he saw Suja and Su Rui looking at him, Jiang Fei smiled and whispered a few words to them. Suja and Su Rui looked at each other. Jiang Fei laughed. "All right. Susenadith and Su Rui cooperatid unconditionally." While Suja and Su Rui left, Jiang Fei and the two girls also went to rest. From tomorrow onwards, Jiang Fei had work to do. Sigh. Jiang Fei sighed and closed his eyes. The next day, the entire city was calm and peaceful. It was no different than usual. However, at night, several of the elders' houses had been robbed. The thieves did not steal or touch the precious items. They seemed to be looking for something. On the third day, the elders gathered again. "How is it?" An elder asked. "Someone went into my house, and my study was disturbed. So was mine. In my house, nothing was stolen, but many things were touched. It seems that Su Rui sent someone to do it. Humph. It's only because that kid relied on the protection of the godly king that he became lawless." The elders discussed animatedly. Moreover, they didn't even need to think about it, and directly blamed Su Rui as the main culprit. Then, did these people accuse Su Rui wrongly? Indeed, they didn't. Those bandits were really sent by Su Rui. One of the young elders asked worriedly, "Don't worry, that key is hidden so well, and all of us have to bring a token to open the door." An elder laughed. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. It really helps this channel keep growing. All right, let's continue. Chapter 3018, 3018. Translator, 549-6903. You guys are really good at hiding. Just as the elders were having a secret discussion, they did not expect Jiang Fei to be listening to them. Although Jiang Fei's spiritual power had been suppressed in the black hole, his own strength was still there. It was impossible for Jiang Fei to be discovered in front of these celestial elders who had less than 40 million combat power. After confirming that the key to the treasure vault was not with one of the elders, Jiang Fei left quietly and returned to the palace. Jiang Fei called a guard from the palace. At this time, the guards in the palace had already known Jiang Fei. They knew that His Majesty the Celestial King trusted him very much. so none of them dared to be the slightest bit negligent. "Go and call him over for me," Jiang Fei said to the guard. Yes. Although Jiang Fei said to call him over, the guard did not dare to be so rude. Jiang Fei nodded. He did not mind how the guard phrased it. As long as he called Su Rue over, it would be fine. About 10 minutes later, Su Rue ran all the way to Jiang Fei with the guard. Su Rue knew that Jiang Fei had gone to find out what was going on, so he asked immediately, "There's a little bit of trouble." Jiang Fei whispered into Su Rue's ear. Su Rue was confused. Jiang Fei smiled. Okay. Su Rue nodded and left the side hall where Jiang Fei lived. After Su Rue came out, he was ready to return to his official residence in the capital. However, before he could leave the palace, he was stopped by Su Zhe. Previously, Su Zhe was chatting with Su Rue. Therefore, Su Rue was called away by Jiang Fei. He knew about it. However, because Jiang Fei did not call him, Su Zhe did not follow him. Now that he saw that Su Rue was about to leave, he rushed out. Su se yeshcherdat Su Rue. Su Rue walked up to Su Zhe in a few steps. Su Zhe asked. He asked me to do something, Su Rue said. Su Zhe asked curiously. Su Rue said with some difficulty. Su Zhe glared at him. Su Rue was really a little afraid. Su Rue waved his hand, and all of the guards around Su Zhe retreated far away. After the guards and attendants left, Su Rue whispered to Su Zhe, "He asked me to send people to spread the news that we have the key." Su Zhe was stunned. Su Rue curled his lips. "That's not right. If we really have it, he should secretly look for us and open the treasure house." Su Zhe frowned and asked, "Su Ruischiragt, Su Sefroneth, why are you thinking so much? Since the prophecy says that he is the savior and that he can help us, he must have a way," Su Rue said very casually. Su Sefroneth. He did not have that much confidence in Jiang Fei. Perhaps because of the prophecy, Su Rue's trust in Jiang Fei was already blind. "Of course," Su Rue said with a matter-of-fact expression. "Sigh." Su Zhe shook his head and returned to the palace. Su Rue shrugged and left the palace. 2 days later, the entire capital was in an uproar. Everyone was talking about the theft of the Elders Guild's key. Moreover, they were describing it as if it was something out of the ordinary. Under such an atmosphere, the elders only endured for half a day before they gathered together again. "I heard that the key was stolen." "Impossible. That place is so hidden, and he doesn't have a keepsake. How could he possibly open the door?" "It's hard to say. The description outside is pretty accurate." "Yeah, especially the description of the shape of the key. There's really nothing wrong with it. Could it really have been stolen? They can't open the door. Even if they found the place, how could they have stolen the key? Who told you that you have to open the door to steal the key? There's a rumor outside saying that they dug a tunnel and bypassed the main door." "Damn, is that true? It sounds like it's true. I don't think it's groundless." "Then what should we do? Go and take a look?" "Oh, we have to go and take a look. Otherwise, we won't be able to rest assured." "That's right. If we don't go and take a look, we won't be able to sleep soundly in the future." "Sleep soundly? If it's really lost, we have to go to the treasury to block it. We can't let His Majesty and the others open the treasury." "That's right. Even if we have to use our lives, we have to stop them." Soon, the elders reached an agreement. Although they did not know if the key had really been stolen, they had to go and confirm it. Jiang Fei, who was listening from the window outside, smiled. Soon, the elders returned home. After they took their commander's keepsakes, they gathered together again and quietly headed to a remote valley outside the city. They are really well hidden. Jiang Fei followed them from afar. As he could not release his spiritual power, he could not search a large area. Therefore, he could only rely on his strategy. He let these people lead the way. An invisibility followed behind these people. Jiang Fei entered the valley. At that moment, he was almost flying close to the ground. Although he was about the same height as he was walking, his feet never touched the ground. The reason why Jiang Fei did this was very simple. He was afraid that he would step on some dead branches or stones. The sound would make the elders in front excited. Then, not to mention that Jiang Fei's plan had failed, the elders would definitely not fall for it again. After entering the valley, the elders went around in circles. Finally, they came to a cliff. If one were to observe with their eyes, the cliff here was plain. It was not even very steep. It looked very inconspicuous. The leader of the elders called out to the group. After some operations, the ground cracked open and a platform rose up. Immediately after, the other elders went forward and took out their keepsakes one by one. Then, they placed them at the designated gap on the stone platform. Soon, all the gaps were mended. Then, with a slight sound of the mechanism, the cliff cracked open. Chapter 3019, 3019. Translator, 549-6903. A crack appeared on the cliff wall, revealing a deep tunnel. The leader of the elders called out to everyone. Then, he lit up his torch and walked in. The other elders followed closely behind. Seeing that all the elders had gone in, and that the crack on the cliff wall was about to close, Zhang Fei flashed and followed them in. He followed the elders from afar and walked in the dark tunnel. Fortunately, his night vision was relatively strong, so he could see the path in front of him clearly. After following the elders all the way, about 10 minutes later, Zhang Fei entered a hall. Then, the elders gathered in front of a stone pillar. They all turned their backs and stood facing outside. This forced Zhang Fei to find a corner to hide. Although he was in stealth mode, Zhang Fei was still unwilling to take the risk. Then, Zhang Fei saw one of the elders turn around. He touched a special position on the stone pillar and returned to where he was standing before. He continued to stand with his back facing the stone pillar. The second elder began to repeat the actions of the person in front of him. Next was the third, the fourth. Soon, all the elders touched a special position on the stone pillar. Then, Zhang Fei heard the sound of the mechanical transmission again. D'asterisk emin. There's a password? Zhang Fei was a little dumbfounded. These elders were a little too cautious, right? However, after thinking about it, it made sense. The purpose of the Elder Council was to ensure that the treasure vault of sealing technology was not opened. Their ancestors did not do anything else, so their minds were all focused on this. With the sound of mechanical transmission, the stone wall on one side of the hall flipped. On the back of the stone wall was a small platform with a wooden brocade box on it. After seeing the brocade box, a group of elders went over. They carefully opened the brocade box and looked inside. Phew! The elders heaved a sigh of relief. I told you it was fine, right? This place is so hidden. How could they steal the key? That's not what you said before. All right. The safety of the key has been confirmed. Let's go. Let's go. It's better to stay here, lest we are discovered. Suddenly, an elder spoke. Huh? The rest of the elders were stunned. Look, we hid the key so well that outsiders definitely wouldn't know. However, they deliberately claimed that they had the key. In the end, we ran over to take a look. The elder said, "It makes sense." Sigh. They were impulsive. The other elders discussed animatedly. Now is not the time to talk about this. The elder asked. An elder suggested, what if those people are blocking us outside the door and we take the key out? Wouldn't that be walking into a trap? And even if no one stops us, where will we put the key after we take it out? I'm afraid that it won't be safe in anyone's hands, right? We won't be able to build a place as safe as this place in a short time. Yeah, then what should we do? The elders were conflicted again. At this moment, a young elder said. Everyone looked at the young elder. Look, if we put it back, as long as the trap is locked, they won't be able to find where the key is hidden. The young elder said. The other elders nodded their heads. Because the stone wall where the key was located was very thick and heavy, and the stone material used was also very sturdy, it was almost impossible to open it manually. But the password was kept by all the elders. As long as one of them refused to tell the password, then it was impossible to open the mechanism. Therefore, it was relatively easy to keep the secret of the key. At the moment, there is no good way. The other elders nodded and agreed to the proposal. Then, these people put the key back into the wooden box. Then, they reversed the mechanism and let the stone wall hide the wooden box again. The leading elder said. The other elders nodded one after another. Then, the group of people left the secret chamber in the belly of the mountain. After leaving the secret chamber, the elders took back their keepsakes. Then, they quietly returned to the capital. To the elders' surprise, they were not captured. No one stopped them. Su Zhe and Su Rue did not plan to attack them. Just as the elders were all worried, Jiang Fei remained in the secret chamber. Password. Jiang Fei smiled. Then, he waved his hand and summoned the Chongying sword. The metal-type spiritual energy covered the Chongying sword. Then, Jiang Fei shook his wrist. With a loud shout, the Chongying sword struck the stone wall, causing a string of sparks. Jiang Fei took a deep breath. The stone wall was not split open as he had expected. Instead, it only left a shallow mark. After seeing that the Chongying sword could not cut open the stone wall, Jiang Fei withdrew the Chongying sword. However, he was not too worried. Then, Jiang Fei took 2 steps forward and placed his hands on the stone wall. At the same time, his spiritual energy began to change continuously among the 5 elements. Jiang Fei was trying. He wanted his spiritual energy to be the same as the stone wall's attributes. Then, he would vibrate at the same frequency. This would cause the stone wall to resonate. Very soon, Jiang Fei's spiritual power locked onto the metal attribute. Then, he began to adjust the frequency of his spiritual power. At the same time, Jiang Fei activated his Eye of Violets. He began to carefully observe the stone wall's attributes. He also began to look for the frequency of its vibration. Under the Eye of Violets, the stone wall gradually became microscopic and became particles. Finally, it became sections of energy strings. These energy strings continuously vibrated and formed special particles. These particles eventually formed a solid stone wall. Jiang Fei began to use his spiritual power to move the energy strings. Previously, he had used his spiritual power. However, he could not release his spiritual power now. Therefore, he could only try to use his heavy spiritual power to do this delicate thing. Chapter 3020, 3020. Translator 549-6903. Fortunately, it was easier to destroy than to build. Jiang Fei only needed to change the frequency of the energy string. He did not need to adjust it to a specific frequency. However, Jiang Fei still completed what he wanted to do. As Jiang Fei touched the energy string, one of the particle's attributes changed. A chain reaction began to happen. The frequency of the energy string was affected one after another. Therefore, the original attributes of the particles also changed. Although the change was random, the probability of changing to a good property was very low. Most of the particle structure was not as strong as before after the transformation. The Chongying sword jumped into Jiang Fei's hand again. This time, Jiang Fei waved the Chongying sword and easily broke through the defense of the stone wall. The thick stone wall was cut into pieces. As Jiang Fei dug, the exquisite wooden box soon appeared in front of him. When he opened the wooden box, there was a hexagram-shaped key lying inside. Jiang Fei smiled slightly. Then, he weighed the key in his hand and put it away. After obtaining the key, it was not difficult to leave the underground secret room. Although the elders had sealed the door when they left, it could not stop Lord Jiang from teleporting. Previously, he did not know where the secret room was. Without knowing the situation inside, Jiang Fei did not dare to use it recklessly. However, it was different now. When he returned, he waved his hand and returned to the side hall where he lived in the palace. "Husband, you're back? How is it?" Ariel immediately came over. "Hee, your husband made a move," Jiang Fei said proudly. At the same time, he also scratched Ariel's little nose. Ariel snorted softly. Then, she wrinkled her little nose. However, she was not angry. She leaned on Jiang Fei's shoulder and smiled. "Then, let me see it quickly." Jiang Fei took out the key from the ring space and handed it to Ariel. Ariel played with it for a while. Then, she lost interest and threw it back to Jiang Fei. Nina tapped Ariel's forehead. Then, she came to Jiang Fei's side and asked, "What do you plan to do next? Open the seal with Su Rue and the others?" "Yes." Jiang Fei nodded. If he did not resolve the 10,000-year pact with the Mechs, he would not be able to get the password. Without the password, he would not be able to activate the shuttle to leave the black hole. Therefore, he would have to open the seal sooner or later. That's true. Although Nina did not say it explicitly, she pointed out her worries. I've thought about what you said before I came here. However, now that I've seen the mechs in this state, I'm relieved. That kind of cutting-edge technology is not something that can be easily retrieved. That would require hundreds of years of technological accumulation. Now, even if the mechs have opened up the treasury, they can only use it at most. When I return to the outside world, I will bring the key technological information back to Skodastar. With our technological background, we will definitely be able to master these technologies before the mechs, said Jiang Fei. Nina nodded. She had stayed on this planet for a longer period of time, so she had a better understanding of these Protoss. They were now completely different from the mechs that Jiang Fei had described. All right, let's rest first, Jiang Fei said with a smile. The two girls nodded. Then, the three of them went back to their rooms to rest. Early the next morning, Su Rui appeared outside the side hall, where Jiang Fei was staying as if he was at work. How is it? Su Rui asked loudly as soon as he entered the courtyard. All right, stop shouting. Jiang Fei's voice came from inside the room. When Su Rui heard Jiang Fei's tone, he was overjoyed. He jogged all the way to his brother's bedroom. His brother had not woken up yet. As the people of planet Namek were parthenogenetic, there was no concept of female companionship. Su Rui directly barged into the bedroom. When the guards at the door saw him, they did not dare to stop him. Therefore, Su Rui directly came to the door of Suja's room. Brother! Su Rui shouted from outside the door. Why are you so impatient? Suja walked out of the main hall in a bad mood. At this time, he was still a little sleepy. Then, Suja would have to give the order to push him out and kill him. Brother! Su Rui did not say anything. He pulled Suja out of his bedroom and went straight to the side hall where Jiang Fei lived. When Suja saw where Su Rui was running, he quickly reacted. Suja asked. Su Rui said, What do you mean you think so? Su Sifronith. I didn't even have the time to ask. He told me to come find you, so I came quickly, Su Rui said. Sai. Su Sisaiv. His younger brother was now obsessed with Jiang Fei. Soon, the two brothers arrived at the side hall where Jiang Fei lived. After the two entered the side hall, Suja asked directly, How was it? Did you get it? Jiang Fei nodded and took out the key. Just as Jiang Fei took out the key, Suja waved his hand. A white light flashed in his palm, and the same hexagram appeared in his hand. Then, Suja took the hexagram that Jiang Fei brought back and compared it with the one in his hand. The two hexagrams were very similar, but there were some differences. That's right. Suja nodded and confirmed that what Jiang Fei had brought back was the real key. Brother? Su Rui asked. Suja was a little hesitant. Su Rui saw that Suja did not say anything and looked at Jiang Fei. Of course, the sooner we make an appointment, the better. The exiled people are about to return. We don't have much time to train our soldiers. Moreover, the elders might discover that the key has been stolen at any time. If they come out to cause trouble, it would be troublesome. Jiang Fei said, Brother. After listening to Jiang Fei's words, Su Rui was also a little anxious. Chapter 3021, 3021. Translator, 549-6903 tonight. Fine. Suja gritted his teeth. He had thought it through. Since he had made up his mind to open the seal, it was better to do it sooner rather than later. That's great, Su Rui said and turned to leave. Don't alarm too many people, Jiang Fei reminded him. Don't worry, Su Rui replied and turned around to leave. Suja had no reason to stay on Jiang Fei's side. He had nothing in common with Jiang Fei. Your Majesty, it's best if you don't alert the people around you too early. The situation around you is more complicated, Jiang Fei said. Susanadith. Although he was a godly king, he must have countless spies around him. Although these people might not betray him, they would at least inform him. It was inevitable to sell some information to earn some money. As a king, Suja knew what to do. After Suja and Su Rui left, Jiang Fei sat with the two girls. They looked at each other. The three of them had nothing to prepare. They would only need to open the seal at night. A day passed in the blink of an eye. Su Rue was very busy outside. However, the palace was quiet. Suja was not in a hurry to gather his men. When it was almost dark, he suddenly gathered a team of royal guards. Then he called Jiang Fei and the others and left the city. No one, including the leader of the royal guards, knew what the king of God wanted to do. However, they did not dare to ask. Therefore, they could only follow the king out of the city in a daze. Outside the city, Jiang Fei and the others met Su Rue and the others who had already left the city in the name of hunting. The two teams gathered together and formed a team. Then, they headed into the mountain. At that moment, everyone, including the royal guards, knew that the king god was about to enter the forbidden area. However, it was already too late to inform the king god. At this time, not to mention running back to inform the king god, intentionally leaving the team was a capital offense. Very soon, the group entered the forbidden area in the mountain. There were many soldiers guarding this place all year round. However, the problem was that they could stop others. However, who would dare to stop Suja, the king of gods? Therefore, Jiang Fei and the group easily entered the forbidden area. They then walked all the way to a cave in the depths of the mountain. "This is the entrance to the seal," Suja said as he walked in front. Jiang Fei took a deep breath. Suja nodded and walked forward. After some maneuvering on the stone wall, a heavy mechanical transmission sound was heard. Creak, creak. The sound of the gears grinding together was very dull. It seemed that the thing that was being pushed was not light. A moment later, a silver-white metal pillar rose from the entrance of the cave. This thing was obviously the style of the mechs. Jiang Fei was very familiar with it. After the silver-white metal pillar rose, Suja took 2 steps forward and took out the 2 keys on his body. The one that Jiang Fei had brought back was also in his hands. Ga! Ga! With 2 crisp sounds, Suja inserted the 2 keys into the keyhole. Key! Ka 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 ka! When the 2 keys were inserted into the keyhole, the silver-white pillar began to rotate. The pillar was divided into many sections. The angle between each section was constantly adjusted as if it was opening the lock. After about 2 minutes, the pillar stabilized again. Then, it sank into the ground again. Suja walked into the cave. Su Rue, Jiang Fei, and the others quickly followed. Behind them were the Imperial Guards and their entourage. Not long after entering the cave, Jiang Fei found that the cave had already been lit up. There were incandescent light sources everywhere, illuminating the entire cave. As they continued to go deeper, Jiang Fei found many signs of the gates opening. After passing through these gates, the group walked for about 20 minutes before they arrived in front of a silver-white metal gate. Suja pressed a few buttons on the operating table beside him. He had already done his homework before coming here. The royal family had always kept a usage manual that recorded how to open the seal. As Suja operated the manual, a tray came out. Suja bit his middle finger and wiped some blood on the tray. DNA testing. Identity verification complete. A familiar mechanical voice sounded. This tone was exactly the same as when Jiang Fei first met 0541. This last door was clearly used to ensure that only the mechs could open the seal. The purpose was to prevent the mech from sealing their technology and being wiped out by other races. The mech technology would not fall into the hands of their enemies. After the identity was confirmed, the door opened. The hall was still lit up by a light source. Suja was the first to enter the hall. Su Rue followed closely behind. Jiang Fei and the 2 girls followed closely behind. The rest of the people were left outside the hall. After entering the hall, Jiang Fei found that other than an extinguished console and a large screen, there were also a few passageways, database, and other names. Su Rue pointed at the console and asked. Suja shook his head. The royal family's manual only recorded how to enter the door, but there was no detailed explanation for the rest. Jiang Fei stood up. He was quite familiar with Planet Namex technology. Jiang Fei stepped forward and skillfully activated the control panel. When the big screen lit up, Su Rue's eyes widened in excitement, because this was one of the contents recorded in the scroll. The prophecy is true. Su Rue shouted excitedly in his heart. Jiang Fei was not in the mood to manually control it. Therefore, he directly let 0544 take over the place. 0544 carried out Jiang Fei's order. He quickly took over the control panel and the entire underground treasure house. Jiang Fei asked 0544. 0544 replied. Then he continued to report to Jiang Fei. The treasure house is divided into 4 parts. The largest part is the database, which contains a large amount of technology and information. The other 3 parts include civil technology equipment, military weapons equipment, and medical equipment. Jiang Fei nodded. Then he said to 0544, "Put the rest aside for now. You can back up all the technological information and technical knowledge for me." 0544 immediately accepted the order. Chapter 3022. Translator 549-6903. Jiang Fei asked 0544 to download the information. Jiang Fei turned around and said to Suja and Surue, "The 4 warehouses behind you respectively store the technological knowledge of the ancient nemesis, weapons and equipment, civil technology, and medical equipment. Now that I have unlocked the warehouses, I can take things from them." "That's great." Surue was so excited that he was at a loss. Suja said, now that the war was in front of them, they could put everything else aside. The most important thing was to take out the weapons first and then train the soldiers. Jiang Fei nodded. Surui nodded. Then he shouted at the servants and the royal guards outside the door. "Come in, carry the things." The servants and the royal guards who were waiting outside the door answered. Then they entered the hall under the leadership of their respective leaders. Then they entered the armory in an orderly manner under Jiang Fei's command. Once he entered the armory, Jiang Fei was stunned. He was the first person to enter the armory because the electronic lock on the door required him to open it. When he entered the armory, the size of the armory alone was enough to shock Jiang Fei. The size of the entire armory was almost as big as the belly of the mountain. There were a lot of weapons and equipment here, from fighter jets and mechs to various types of individual weapons. However, there was one thing that surprised Jiang Fei. That was that there were no battleships stored here. However, after thinking about it, Jiang Fei understood. Although the armory had emptied the belly of the mountain, compared to the huge size of the battleships, this place was actually nothing. There was almost no military airport on the ground. Because the ground was narrow, it was impossible to dock those huge battleships that were more than 10 kilometers long. As for those supermain ships that were hundreds or thousands of kilometers long, it was even more impossible for them to dock on the surface of the planet. Due to their huge size and mass, the amount of energy that they used to escape the planet's gravity was astronomical. Jiang Fei said to the royal guards. The royal guards replied and began to move the things out. Surue pointed at the mecha and mech beside him and asked. Jiang Fei was a little hesitant. It was impossible to learn equipment such as mecha and mech in 3 to 5 days. Just now, Jiang Fei was only stunned for a short while before he stopped investigating the sealed land of those battleships. It was also because of the same reason. However, they had lost all their technological knowledge. It would take them at least 1 to 2 years to train them back into soldiers who served on the battleships. The exiles would not give them the time nor the opportunity to do so. Could those exiles have come here in a battleship? Jiang Fei thought to himself. His goal was to get the level 2 password. As for whether he would help the Protoss or the exiles, he did not really care. Anyway, Jiang Fei and the descendants of the Nemesis were just using each other. The descendants of the Nemesis provided him with a level 2 password. He was responsible for bringing a portion of the descendants of the Nemesis out of the black hole. Therefore, Jiang Fei did not have much of a relationship with these people. There was no such thing as betrayal. This is amazing. Surue came in front of a huge mech. This mech was more than 20 meters tall. Its entire body was made of silver-white metal. Although Jiang Fei did not know its specific attributes, he could tell that its combat power was not low just by looking at its streamlined body. In terms of weapons and equipment, generally speaking, a good-looking person's combat ability would not be too bad. This was basically universally acknowledged. That's right. Zhang Fei could not help but sigh. Instead, they had returned to the primitive stage. Just as Zhang Fei was sighing endlessly, there was a sudden noise from outside. Susefronith, Your Majesty, this is bad. The elders of the Elder Council have blocked the exit with their men. They do not allow us to move these things out. An officer of the royal guards ran to Suja and said, "Humph." Suja snorted coldly. Although their actions were secretive enough, as a divine king, Suja's every move would attract attention. It was impossible for him to leave the city in the middle of the night without alerting others. The elders, who were already on the edge of their seats, heard the commotion and went straight to the secret room under the hiding place. When they reached there, they discovered that the key had been stolen. As a result, these elders rushed to the forbidden area without stopping. Therefore, just as these imperial guards were transporting things out, they were stopped by the elders who had rushed over. A bunch of useless and destructive things. Su Rue greeted Suja and then stormed out in a huff. Su Rue was the representative of the practical faction. In his opinion, winning or losing the 10,000-year pact was meaningless. Only by winning the war could he stop being someone else's slave, take out the powerful weapon in the seal, and defeat the enemy. This was a matter of course. And those elders with 10,000-year ideals and firm beliefs didn't do anything wrong. It could only be said that both sides had different views. Su Rue and Suja couldn't agree with the elders' views. After coming out of the cave, Su Rue met with the elders. Besides the elders, almost all the important figures in the capital had come. The elders were afraid that they could not stop the godly king from opening the seal, so they called these people. Their purpose was to pressure Suja and make him retreat. In the end, they gave up on the plan to open the seal. Su Rue said with a cold snort, "Your Highness, this seal cannot be opened." The leading elder said, "Old ancestors rule?" Su Rue glared at the elder and said, Chapter 3023. Translator 549-6903. Your Highness, don't be alarmist. Even if we lose, the exiles might not demote us to slaves. The leading elder said, "Humph." Su Rue sneered, then he turned to the higher-ups of the other Celestials and said, "Today, I'm not afraid to tell you that the 10,000-year pact is coming soon. The exiles will come to seek revenge soon. You can see our current strength. At most, we can only bully the Wallen. Against the powerful exiles who can cross the void, we have almost no chance of winning." The 10,000-year pact. The exiles. The sealed memories were awakened once again. Many of the higher-ups of the Protoss had already forgotten about this matter after 10,000 years of drunken dreams. When they came to the Forbidden Land today, some of them were awakened by this memory. However, some people still did not take this matter seriously. However, when Su Rue made it clear, everyone's hearts began to pound. Even those who had completely forgotten about it had also heard about the 10,000-year pact from others. This made everyone feel a sense of panic in their hearts. Right now, there's a large amount of technological equipment in the sealed land behind me. This is what the ancestor left for us. As long as we equip these weapons and train our warriors to use them, we will be able to defeat the enemy and become the final victor. But what about these elders? They followed the old rules from 10,000 years ago. They did not even hesitate to turn their entire clan into lowly slaves. Su Rue loudly incited everyone present. "I won't be a slave either. I won't be one either. Who the F*CK wants to be one? I support His Highness to take out these weapons. I support it too." There are almost no people who insisted on their faith like the members of the Elder Council. Other than the members of the Elder Council who had no worries about food and clothing, their mission in life was to stick to their faith. Everyone else had to work hard for their lives and power. They had worked hard to achieve what they had today. If you asked them to go back to being slaves, of course they would not agree. Faith was an illusory thing. Only a few people could carry it out unswervingly. Most people could believe in it when they had nothing to do, but when the time came, their lives and interests were more important. Therefore, the God Clan elders chose to support Su Rue. No one knew who had initiated the attack on these elders. Moreover, once this opening was opened, it would be impossible to clean it up. Everyone swarmed over and surrounded the elders. These people had no grudges with the elders, but they absolutely could not allow anyone to force them to be slaves to others. Since these elders were so stubborn, they could only get rid of these stumbling blocks. These higher-ups of the God clan were very heavy-handed. Soon, the elders were beaten until they were on the verge of death. At this moment, Su Rue was a little soft-hearted. His wrist was grabbed by someone. Su Rue turned around and saw that the person who grabbed his wrist was Suja. Su Rue was stunned. Suja waved his hand. Su Rue frowned and said, "They no longer have any meaning to exist," Suja said. The purpose of these elders' existence was to keep the key to the seal, to ensure that the seal was not opened. If they were still alive, Suja would not be able to deprive them of their lofty status. At that time, these people or their descendants, who enjoyed their lofty status, would inevitably be tempted by power. In order to avoid future trouble, Suja decided to eliminate the root of the problem. In fact, after making the decision to open the seal, Suja already had the intention to kill these elders. However, he could not do so. After all, the elder status was high. The others would definitely be anxious. Now that the other higher-ups wanted to kill these elders, Suja could not wait to do so. Although Su Rue could understand his brother's thoughts, he could not stand it anymore. Therefore, he turned around and returned to the cave. Suja was left in charge outside. After watching these elders being beaten to death, Suja signaled the higher-ups of the Protoss to stop. Then, he began to give an impassioned speech. The obstacle that prevented the Protoss from resisting had been removed. Everyone had to work together to fight against the exiles. Just as Suja was giving his speech, Jiang Fei received a notification from 0544. 0544 said. Jiang Fei nodded. The data was enough to make a qualitative leap in the technology of Skodastar. He believed that even if the Mech were taken out, they would need at least a few decades or 100 years to regain control of the technology. It would take at least tens to hundreds of years longer than Skodastar. Su Rue asked worriedly, although there were no longer any obstacles to opening the seal. Looking at these unfamiliar things, he really did not know how to use them. The way to use these individual weapons is very simple. I estimate that in about a week or so, the soldiers will be able to use them normally. In about a month or so, they will be able to display better combat power, Jiang Fei said. Su Rue pointed at the mecha and asked, "It's hard to say. If they're talented, they can operate them in a few weeks' time." After Jiang Fei finished speaking, he asked Su Rue, "How long until the exiles arrive here?" "According to my brother, the time has already passed. However, you also know that this is a 10,000-year agreement. It doesn't matter if the other party is a few weeks or a few months late," Su Rue said. Oh, Jiang Fei was stunned. He had always thought that the time had not yet passed. "That's right," said Su Rue. Damn it. Jiang Fei cursed in his heart after listening to Su Rue. Needless to say, this must have been planned by those people. Jiang Fei stopped halfway. He had wanted to ask Su Rue if it was possible that the exiles had lost their technology and could not return. However, he had just finished speaking. Jiang Fei shut up. He knew that with the abilities of those people from 10,000 years ago, if they had not foreseen that the exiles would return, they would not have set him up like this. Chapter 3024, 3024. Translator 549-6903. That night, all the individual weapons were transported out. The cave was not sealed again. Although the heavy weapons were still inside, Suja had arranged a large number of soldiers to guard the entrance. In the following period of time, Jiang Fei made a training plan for Suja and Su Rue. As the individual weapons were very easy to use, the most they needed to do was to change the energy magazines. The rest was basically just aiming and pulling the trigger. All of these training was very easy. Other than training the Protoss soldiers to use the Nemesis Star individual weapons that were left behind from ancient times, Jiang Fei also had Suja pick some smart and capable soldiers. He planned to train these people to become fighter pilots and mech pilots. As the equipment in the equipment warehouse was very complete, and there were also simulation training equipment, Zhang Fei, who had already given up on these heavy weapons, had a new idea. No one could determine the date of the return of the exiles. Since there was nothing to do now, it was better to train a group of elite pilots. If they could win the war, then Zhang Fei would not have to recruit the exiles again. Time passed day by day. In the blink of an eye, 2 weeks had passed. The Protoss soldiers who used individual weapons had basically formed their combat strength. However, they lacked a unified command. After all, the original officers were used to fighting with cold weapons. Now that they were asked to command the technological troops, they could not do it at all. Meanwhile, the soldiers who had been selected to be the pilots of the fighter jets and mecha were still training on the simulator. Although these people were very smart, they had never come into contact with these things before. Therefore, their learning progress was very slow. At the same time, Zhang Fei also understood the biggest flaw of this temporary technological equipment. There was no logistical support at all. This meant that the war between them and the exiles was a one-time deal. Although the Protoss could constantly recruit soldiers, the loss of weapons and equipment could not be made up for. Even the ammunition could be used up. The Protoss, who had no technological foundation, could not build a factory to produce weapons, equipment, and ammunition. Therefore, at the beginning of the war, Zhang Fei had already made preparations. He would throw all his weapons and soldiers into the battlefield at the same time to try to defeat the enemy in one fell swoop. If the first attack failed, Zhang Fei would be ready to find an opportunity to rope in the exiles. Due to the lack of logistical support, once they were caught in a protracted war, the Protoss side would have no chance to turn the tables. As he continued to train the soldiers, Zhang Fei waited patiently. He believed that since the people of planet Namek 10,000 years ago had designed him to such a stage, they would not let him off easily. The exiles would definitely come, and it would not be for long. Time passed slowly while waiting, not only for Zhang Fei, but also for Su Zhe and Su Rui. Every day was a torture because the victory or defeat of the war was much more important to them than to Zhang Fei. Finally, 2.5 months after the seal was opened, a strange phenomenon came from the sky. Boom! A thunderous sound came from the sky above their heads. Is it coming? Is the 10,000-year promise coming? Not only Su Zhe, Su Rui, and Zhang Fei, but all the Celestials in the capital came out to watch. With such a big commotion, everyone was alarmed except for the dead. Crack! Dark clouds filled the sky. Bolts of lightning flashed across the sky. Soon after, a huge shadow descended from the sky. The size of a shadow was enough to cover the entire celestial capital. Su Zhe muttered to himself, "It's here! It's here!" Su Rui muttered. Unlike Su Zhe, Su Rui did not look too anxious. Instead, he looked a little excited. Zhang Fei heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. When he saw the return of the exiles, his heart calmed down. The victory or defeat between the Protoss and the exiles did not mean much to Zhang Fei. His goal was to take the level 2 password. As for whether he would take the Protoss or the exiles, it did not make much of a difference to him. Accompanied by thunder and lightning, a huge starship landed and finally hovered above the Imperial City. A transport plane flew down from the starship and headed straight for the Imperial City. Then, it landed a few hundred meters away from the Imperial City. Key. As the cabin door opened, a few green-skinned exiles walked out. Their attire was very modern, and they looked like the Mech from back then. We're the suffering people who have been exiled for many years. We are here to fulfill the promise of 10,000 years. Please come forward and talk to your leader. The leader of the exiles shouted from outside the city gate. Su Rui asked. Su Zhe was a little hesitant. Let's go over and take a look, Zhang Fei said. Su Senadith. Then, he was the first to walk up the city wall. Su Rui, Zhang Fei, and the others followed him. The leader of the exiles asked from outside. That's right. Su City Plaith. Protasi. The leader of the exiles laughed coldly. Then he continued. Now, we have come to the 10,000-year pact to prove our choice back then. Su Zhe asked. If you're willing to admit that your choice was wrong and apologize for the exiles who exiled our ancestors back then we're willing to cooperate with you." His tone suddenly changed. "If you refuse to admit your mistake and don't apologize to our ancestors, then we can only verify our choice back then through war." Suja pondered for a moment. The best outcome now was to admit their mistakes and apologize to their ancestors. Then the exiles who mastered advanced technology would definitely become the dominant force. Even if he, the godly king, was not crippled, he would still be dethroned. Mistakes? What mistakes do we have? Back then, technology almost destroyed us. After pondering for a moment, Suja made a decision that almost all the emperors had made together. The country was destroyed, and the family was destroyed. I'm also the ruler of a country. It was absolutely impossible for me to hand over the country to others. This was what Suja was thinking at this moment. In the eyes of these rulers, the chair under his but was more important than anything else. Even if he died, he would still die on this chair. Moreover, he would drag everyone down with him. He would also be the ruler of a dynasty after his death. Chapter 3025, 3025. Translator, 549-6903. All right. The leader of the exiles under the city wall nodded, then turned around to return to the transport plane. At the same time, Suja also gave the order. Brother? Surue was a bit rigid. He felt that even if the two armies fought, they would not kill an envoy, let alone the other party who was the first to suggest peace. Oomph. The other party is much stronger than us, Suja said coldly. At the same time, he signaled the soldiers beside him to act. A beam of light shot straight towards the exile's back. This kind of beam weapon was almost ready to be fired. The exile's leader was not prepared at all and was immediately shot through the heart. The soldiers on the city wall opened fire one after another. Beams of light shot towards the exiles below the city wall. This time, there were a total of 5 exiles who had boarded the transport plane to question them. Other than the leader, who was instantly killed on the spot, none of the others had escaped. They were all shot into sieves by the random gunfire. When the transport plane saw that the situation was not good, the pilot inside began to pull up urgently. However, it was already too late. Since Suja had already given the order to attack, how could the Protoss soldiers let this transport plane go? A beam of light as thick as a thigh shot straight at the transport plane. Although the transport plane had activated its shield, it was still unable to withstand the attack of this single soldier energy cannon. This single soldier weapon, which was left over from 10,000 years ago, was extremely powerful. Although the civilian transport plane had activated its shield, it was completely unable to withstand it. Immediately, the shield was penetrated, and then the fuselage was penetrated again. However, this shot did not hit the vital point of the transport plane. The aircraft continued to climb upwards, attempting to return to the starship in the air. Another few beams of light shot over. In the end, the transport plane was unable to return to the starship successfully. It was blown up in the air at a distance of more than 200 meters from the ground. Suja waved his hand. Following that, all kinds of ground weapons began to fire at the starship in the air. Although most of them were individual weapons and only a few light energy cannons, these equipment were energy weapons after all. Their range was very far, and the starship was only a few hundred meters away from the ground. Therefore, the beams of light all hit the starship. However, these attacks were all blocked by the starship's energy shield. Ripples appeared in the air. This was the effect of the energy weapons attacking the shield, but the starship was still safe and sound. One fighter jet after another rose into the air. The pilots of these fighter jets had only received simple training. Some of them did not even learn how to land before piloting the fighter jets to meet the enemy. These fighter jet pilots were all second-rate fighters. After taking off, quite a few fighter jets swayed and almost collided with their wingmen. Even so, they still flew towards the huge starship in the sky. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Boom, boom, boom. These fighter jets continued to use their energy cannons to attack the starship. At the same time, they were also releasing all the missiles on their mounts. 10,000 years ago, the phase technology of the people of planet Namek was very advanced. Their missiles were even equipped with small phase engines. This meant that the phase missiles could temporarily jump into the phase space when they were about to come into contact with the enemy's shield. After they passed through the shield, they would come out from the phase space and directly attack the enemy's hull. The ability to ignore the shield allowed these missiles to be equipped with first-line combat troops, even in an era where energy weapons were extremely advanced. At this moment, the starship in the sky enjoyed this treatment. A series of explosions occurred on the surface of the starship. In some places, the explosions even caused explosions. Susse order loudly. Zhang Fei, something's not right. So Rui Fronith. Zhang Fei was also confused. The other party had come on a starship. As long as the other party had an idea, the main cannon of the starship would only need one shot to raise the entire celestial capital to the ground. However, what Zhang Fei did not know was that although the starship in the sky was huge, it was a civilian immigration ship. In fact, it was only equipped with high-frequency laser weapons for self-defense. Moreover, this kind of weapon was in use because no one was controlling it. Buzz, buzz. Crack, crack, crack. Boom, boom, boom. Along with the sound of heavy footsteps, mechs that were tens of meters tall appeared behind the city wall. They set up heavy energy snipers and aimed at the starship in the air. The energy snipers fired. These high-energy beams easily penetrated the starship's shield and damaged the hull. Although this type of energy sniper cannon had an extremely long charging and cooling time, when the enemy did not retaliate, the Protoss side had sufficient time to cool down before launching a second attack. Under the barrage of attacks, even the starship with a diameter of more than 30 kilometers could not withstand it anymore. Although the Protoss were only equipped with single-weapon weapons, and the number of planes and mechs that could fight together was not enough to number 30, under their barrage of attacks, the starships in mid-air began to pour down. Then, they fell toward the east of the city. The starship crashed into the ground. The huge impact caused a cloud of dust to fill the sky. It was as if the entire Imperial city was raining dust. It could be said that sand and stones were flying everywhere. Under Suge's order, the army ignored the sand and dust in the sky and surrounded the falling starship. Zhang Fei frowned. Suge's army had too many weaknesses. There were serious flaws in the commanding of the officers of all ranks. Zhang Fei had originally planned to personally command the battle. However, he did not expect the enemy to not fight back at all. After the few exiles who came to talk were killed, the starship in the sky was like a target. It only took a beating and did not fight back. If the enemy only took a beating and did not retaliate, then any weakness of their side would not be shown. Now that the starship had fallen, the army had surrounded it. When the dust had cleared, the starship was surrounded. The only losses on the Protoss side were a few unlucky pilots. They could not land. In the end, they crashed and died. Surue looked at Zhang Fei and asked, although the starship had crashed, the Protoss members who did not understand technology could not even find the door. Chapter 3026, 3026. Translator, 549-6903, Zhang Fei smiled. He did not look for the hatch of the starship. He just randomly picked a porthole and slashed down with his Chungying sword. Amidst the flames, the porthole of the starship was slashed open. It was enough for two people to walk in side by side. Zhang Fei smiled and said. Su Rue scratched his head. When he saw the starship, he felt that he could not play with such high-tech stuff. Therefore, he immediately asked Zhang Fei for help. However, he never thought that the starship had already crashed anyway. He could just break the door open with brute force. Very soon, a large number of Protoss soldiers rushed into the starship with weapons in their hands. Because the starship was too huge, even if thousands of soldiers rushed in, they would still cause some waves. Zhang Fei did not want to wait for too long. Suja nodded and then sent more soldiers into the starship. Although these soldiers had not been trained and were not equipped with technological weapons, they were more than enough to carry out the search mission. A large number of Protoss soldiers entered the starship. They began to search the starship in a carpet-like manner. There was no problem in using brute force to break the door. As the starship's core power system suffered fatal damage during the fall, the ship's defense system and a shield that shielded the isolation door had been rendered ineffective. Even the most ordinary Protoss soldiers had tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of combat power values, not to mention the bombardment of the energy cannons. It was not difficult to break through the shielding doors. After only 4 hours, a soldier came back to report. "Your Majesty," the soldier said to Su Zhe, "Su Senadif." Then he led Su Rue, Jiang Fei, and the others into the starship. Soon, Jiang Fei and the others were led by the soldier to a huge hall. The hall was as big as a football field. There were rows and rows of cabinets inside. In the glass lattice of the cabinets, there were egg after egg. "These are..." Jiang Fei recognized the origins of these Dan with one look. Su Zhe and Su Rue were also dumbfounded. The number of these eggs was at least 1,000,000. After all, the reproductive ability of the planet Meek was very weak. It almost meant that they were all exiles. Jiang Fei suddenly had an idea. Then he rushed out of the hall. 0544, take over the starship. Jiang Fei ordered 0544 as he ran quickly according to his experience. 0544 moved very quickly. Because the starship's central control system was not artificial, 0544 easily took over the control of the starship. He also downloaded the starship's structure blueprint. Under 0544's guidance, Jiang Fei quickly arrived at the bridge. At the same time, Su Rue and Su Zhe also followed. Behind them were Nina and Ariel. When Jiang Fei arrived at the bridge, he did not find anyone. There was only a child from planet Namek lying in a pool of blood. It seemed that he had died during the fall. Jiang Fei ordered. 0544 immediately projected the ship's log after receiving the order. Jiang Fei quickly browsed through the log. Su Zhe, Su Rue, and the others behind him were also looking at the log. According to the contents of the log, when these exiles rushed to the 10,000-year pact, there were only 6 people left. 5 of the adults took the airship to negotiate with Su Zhe. These exiles originally thought that they had the power of technology. As long as they threatened Su Zhe, he would surrender. At that time, he could order Su Zhe to provide a rare element. This element was an important catalyst for the hatching of the Nemesis people. On that man-made habitable planet, there were only a very small amount of catalysts. Therefore, when the first generation of exiles died and spat out the eggs, the other exiles had already discovered this, because most of the eggs couldn't hatch because of the lack of catalyst. At this time, it wasn't that they hadn't thought of immediately giving up the 10,000-year pact and returning to this planet. However, they found that their starship was locked. They could only restart after 10,000 years. This was obviously the God Clan's doing. During these 10,000 years, the exiles crazily exploited the few rare elements on that planet. However, the number of hatchings they could maintain was still decreasing. The one who hatched an egg was the child who died during the fall of the starship. Initially, they thought that after obtaining enough catalyst, they would be able to hatch the egg stored in the starship, allowing the exiles to once again grow stronger. Su Zhe would send someone to shoot them in the back. The sudden attack completely surprised the 5 exiles. They were still adhering to the dogma from 10,000 years ago. They thought that even if they could not come to an agreement, the other party would still let them go. In addition, everyone was eager to set foot on the land of their hometown again. In the end, the 5 adult exiles all came to the surface, and none of them made it back alive. Once the 5 adult exiles died, the entire starship would be completely out of control. When the child saw the death of the 5 elders, he was scared to death. He did not know what to do, and he would not be able to pilot the starship to escape. In the end, the starship fell. The little boy died in the fall. All the exiles died, leaving only the egg in the cabin. Susenadif. At the same time, he was glad that he was decisive enough. If these exiles were allowed to return to the starship, they could order the drones to launch a crazy attack on the Protoss. The Protoss would not be a match for these exiles who had master technology. Although they were few in number, Their automated weapons were enough to defeat the Protoss. Sigh. Jiang Fei sighed. Then he said to 0544, "Have you found the information about the level 2 password?" 0544's answer made Jiang Fei ecstatic. He knew that the level 2 password meant that he could go home. Jiang Fei nodded and gestured for Nina and Ariel to come to his side. Chapter 3027. 3027. Translator 549-6903. Suja turned around and asked. Jiang Fei asked. Yes. Su Rue smiled and said. Then he turned around and said to Jiang Fei, "When do you plan to leave?" "I'll go with you." "Of course. I will make an appointment as soon as possible," Jiang Fei said with a smile. "Then please wait for me for a moment," Su Rue said immediately. Suja suddenly waved his hand. "Brother, didn't we have an agreement? You will be your god king. I will leave this place with him," Su Rue asked with a confused look on his face. "It's not just you," Suja said as he waved his hand. A large number of soldiers with weapons surrounded Jiang Fei and the two girls. Su Rue asked with a confused look. "Didn't they have an agreement before? Why does brother go back on his word?" "Silly brother. Since these aliens can freely pass through the black hole, who can guarantee that he won't lead an army into the black hole when he returns?" Suja asked. Su Rue said. Suja rolled his eyes at Su Rue, as he had never left this planet before. In Suja's eyes, the planet he was on was very rich. Anyone who saw it would drool. However, Suja, who was trapped on a planet, had no idea how gorgeous the starry sky outside was. He had no idea that in the main universe, there were hundreds of millions of habitable planets like his. He simply did not care about his small plot of land. At this moment, Suja was like a beggar who was always worried that the emperor would come and snatch half of his nest. He immediately saw Jiang Fei as a competitor. Therefore, in order to protect the chair under his butt, Suja made the same decision as before. He would take advantage of the fact that Jiang Fei was here alone to kill him first. It was just like how he had killed the exiles before. He wanted to nip the danger in the bud. However, Suja clearly did not expect that his good luck would not last. He was able to kill all the adult exiles in one fell swoop. It was all due to luck. However, Jiang Fei was different. Moreover, his strength was not something Suja could imagine. Suja did not hesitate at all. With a wave of his hand, the soldiers pointed their cannons at Jiang Fei and the other two. Then they pulled the trigger. Jiang Fei laughed coldly. He had never expected that the troops that he had personally trained would eventually point their cannons at him. With a wave of Jiang Fei's hand, he and the two girls beside him disappeared. When they reappeared, Jiang Fei was already behind Suja. What? Suja quickly turned around. As a divine king, he was also very powerful. Even in the 5 directions, he was a top-notch expert. However, no matter how top-notch an expert was, they still had to compete with each other. Compared to Jiang Fei, who was the dragon race's sage lord, the divine king Suja was nothing. When he turned around, Suja also threw a punch at Jiang Fei's face. However, Jiang Fei did not care about Suja's punch at all. He reached out his left hand and grabbed Suja's fist. Then, he pulled it with force. Following that, a crisp sound of bones cracking could be heard. At the same time that Jiang Fei broke Suja's wrist, his right hand also grabbed the top of Suja's head. Suja cried out loudly. There was a reason for the sharp pain in his wrist. However, most of it came from the fear in his heart. However, Suja's fear did not last long. When Jiang Fei's palm grabbed the top of Suja's head, the origin power in his palm erupted. Suja's head was like a rotten watermelon. It was smashed into pieces on the spot. Suja's body fell to the ground. Because the people of planet Namek did not cultivate their immortal souls, even though he was powerful, he was still killed by Jiang Fei in one move. Su Rue was dumbfounded. All of this happened in a flash. Initially, he was still worried about Jiang Fei and wanted to stop the soldiers from attacking. However, in the blink of an eye, Jiang Fei and the two girls beside him were safe and sound. His brother, Suja, was beaten until his brain was split open. Surue rushed to Suja's side and picked up his brother's body. At that moment, although the Protoss soldiers once again aimed their weapons at Jiang Fei and the other two, no one dared to attack them. It was not that the soldiers did not follow the orders. They had tried to attack, but what happened? Their king had died. If they attacked now, their king would probably die too. Therefore, although the soldiers surrounded Jiang Fei and the other two, no one dared to open fire. Surue, what are your plans now? Jiang Fei asked calmly, as if Suja's death was just a normal thing. To Jiang Fei, Suja's death really did not matter. Now that he had obtained the level 2 password, he could leave at any time. He could also bring the girls and teleport into the deep mountains and forests. Then, he could put down the shuttle and leave. Therefore, if Suja attacked Jiang Fei at this time, it would be no different from courting death. He was no longer of value to Jiang Fei. Jiang Fei had nothing to worry about anymore. If he were to provoke him again, would he still be able to tolerate it? Surue hugged his brother who was already courting death in his arms. Tears fell like rain. He hugged his brother's corpse and cried loudly. It was not until half an hour later that he finally calmed down a little. Jiang Fei waited by the side. He was not in a hurry to leave. After all, he had promised Surue that he would take him away. Although an accident had happened during this time, if Surue still wanted to leave, he would not go back on his word. Surue waved his hand with a blank expression. He wanted to avenge his big brother. However, he knew that even if he and all the Protoss soldiers joined forces, they would not be able to kill Jiang Fei. If he was allowed to escape, he would be able to take revenge on the Protoss endlessly. If this continued for a long time, the Protoss might be wiped out by him alone in batches. In order to ensure the survival of the race, even though his big brother was killed by Jiang Fei, Surue could not think of revenge at all. However, now that his big brother was dead, the entire Protoss race was without a leader. It was impossible for Surue to leave the black hole with Jiang Fei. Chapter 3028, 3028. Translator 549-6903. Actually, after killing Suja, Jiang Fei had already guessed that Surue would not leave with him. However, Jiang Fei did not care about that. Besides, Surue staying behind would also save him a lot of trouble. After all, Surue was still relatively strong. Putting him into the inheritance space would put a lot of pressure on Jiang Fei. Jiang Fei said to Surue. Surue asked, "You don't have to worry. I have no interest in this world." Jiang Fei knew what Surue was worried about. Surue hugged Suja's body and cried out loud. He suddenly felt that his big brother's death was too unjust. He would not have made the first move to protect his own power. If that was the case, he would not have died under Jiang Fei's counterattack. Seeing that Surue was crying his heart out, Jiang Fei did not try to persuade him. After all, he was the one who had killed Suja. There was no way for him to say anything. Jiang Fei said to the two girls. Nina and Ariel nodded. Then, Jiang Fei waved his hand, and the three of them disappeared into thin air. When Jiang Fei and the other two reappeared, they had already returned to the valley from before. Jiang Fei also released the shuttle once again. Jiang Fei ordered. 0544 accepted the order and entered the level 2 password. Following that, the shuttle was successfully activated. Jiang Fei said to the two girls. Nina and Ariel were excited. They had once thought that they would never be able to go home again. However, now, they would be able to go back and reunite with everyone. Jiang Fei asked. The two girls nodded. Then, Jiang Fei waved his hand and kept them into the inheritance space. After that, he entered the shuttle. Immediately after, the shuttle rose into the air and left the planet's atmosphere. After entering the outer space, the shuttle started the miniature black hole engine and began to fly in the direction that it had already set. When the shuttle was close to the black hole's vision, the miniature black hole engine was fully activated. The shield value was also raised to the maximum. Then, the shuttle rushed out of the black hole. Even inside the shuttle, Jiang Fei could feel a strong gravitational force that was strong enough to distort his body. Fortunately, this shuttle was designed specifically to enter and exit the black hole, Therefore, although Jiang Fei was under a very strong gravitational force, he managed to survive with his strong physical body. Immediately after, the scene of the light illusion appeared in front of Jiang Fei's eyes again. In this scene, because Jiang Fei had experience, he did not struggle. He just waited quietly because he knew that the shuttle was still moving forward. However, because of the distorted light, he lost his vision. After an unknown amount of time, Jiang Fei's vision was restored again. At this time, he could clearly feel that he had returned to the universe that he was familiar with. According to the star map on the shuttle, Jiang Fei had already returned to the Zavera star field. He was not in a hurry to release Nina and Ariel. Instead, he drove the shuttle straight to Skoda Star. With the powerful power of the black hole engine, Jiang Fei quickly returned to Skoda Star and landed at the airport. The first thing Jiang Fei did when he walked out of the shuttle was to release Nina and Ariel. In order to save time, he made the two girls suffer a lot in the inheritance space. We're going home. Looking at the familiar scene in front of them, Nina and Ariel were extremely excited. They actually felt that this kind of happiness was a little unreal. Looking at the two girls' excited and somewhat incredulous expressions, Jiang Fei felt very uncomfortable. He knew that the two girls had suffered too much in the black hole. It did not take long for all the girls on Skoda Star to rush over. Everyone had an indescribable longing for Nina and Ariel. Bella suddenly pulled Jiang Fei aside and asked. Jiang Fei was stunned. Although it took him some time to go to the black hole to save people, he did not encounter much difficulty overall. Bella's words shocked Jiang Fei. After all, he had only stayed in the black hole for a few months. Most of the time, he was still waiting for the return of the exiles. That's not right. According to the people of planet Namek in the black hole, they have only lived in the black hole for more than 10,000 years. Jiang Fei frowned. Bella asked, "I did not stop." Suddenly, Jiang Fei thought of a question. He immediately turned around and returned to the shuttle. Jiang Fei ordered. 0544 immediately followed Jiang Fei's order. Then he reported, "Captain, according to the record of the shuttle, it took us 7 days to enter the black hole. It took us 4 years and 5 months to leave the black hole." Jiang Fei finally understood. When they entered the black hole, they followed the gravity. Therefore, in just a few days, they entered the black hole and found the planet. The shuttle needed to resist the strong gravitational force of the black hole, so it took a long time. Jiang Fei nodded. After understanding all of this, he returned to Bella's side and explained the matter briefly. "All right, let's not talk about this anymore. Hurry up and follow me." Bella smiled at Jiang Fei after listening to him. Now, it did not matter how much time they spent on the journey. After all, everyone had gathered together. Jiang Fei asked curiously. Bella grabbed Jiang Fei's arm and immediately teleported. When Jiang Fei and Bella left, the other girls also reacted. They pulled Nina and Ariel and teleported to Jiang Fei's parents' residence. At this time, Jiang Fei had already met his parents. His father laughed when he saw Jiang Fei. Quick, quick. His mother also came out of the room. Then, she waved at the room. Jiang Fei was stunned. Then he saw Phoenix Spirit walk out of the room. She was holding a white and fat little boy in her arms. "You, Phoenix Spirit?" Jiang Fei looked at Phoenix Spirit's slender waist that had returned to normal. Clearly, the child had been born for a period of time. Although the growth period of the dragon race was very slow, he had been gone for 5 years. That was 60 years in the world of the 5 directions. "Quickly say hello to Daddy," Phoenix Spirit said to the little boy. "Daddy." After the little boy saw Jiang Fei, he was not at all unfamiliar with him. He leaped into Jiang Fei's arms and smiled at Jiang Fei. Jiang Fei was stunned. "You destroyed the channel and the server that connected to the Gamma space. I was not willing to sit around and wait for death. So, I could only give up my ability and reincarnate." The little boy said to Jiang Fei with a strange smile. "You, Vinolin?" Jiang Fei's eyes widened. End of book. And that's it for this part. Thanks so much for listening. If you loved it, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one, and drop a comment letting me know what story you want to see next. See you in the next part.